Good evening and welcome to the Planning Board meeting for September 12th, 2023. It is now 7 o'clock and the public hearings start at 7:15. So as we normally do, we'll start with the old new business section of the agenda. And the first thing we have on our agenda is the approval of meeting minutes for, oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. I felt like I was skipping something. All right, and we have all of our members here today, myself, Vice Chair Crowe, Member McCamey, Member Kent, Member Grove, and Member Conley, who's an alternate member. Okay. So moving on to the approval of meeting minutes for July 11th, 2023. Although I watched the meeting, I was not in attendance, so I will abstain from voting. But if we have a motion on those minutes, or if there's any questions.
Move to accept the meetings from the minutes of the meeting from July 11th, 2023. Second.
We have a motion by Member Kent and a second by Member Grove. All those in favor say aye.
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 And that was 4 ayes, and then I will not be voting on that one. Okay. The next thing we have on our agenda is a request for as-built approval for 100 Commerce Way, Planning Board File 9904, Frito-Lay. I don't have my staff report. Is that, Connor, was that you? Okay. All right, so
If I may, through the Vice Chair, the applicant has requested the Planning Board grant as-built approval and release the surety tied to this project. Just a way of background, the Planning Board on March 8th, 2022 voted to approve the major modification from Planning Board Decision 9904 to allow for the construction of a 1,008 square foot loading dock to the rear of the existing warehouse. The addition included 3 recessed bays that allow for loading and unloading at the dock height. The project also included the creation of an additional parking area to the north that included 16 tractor-trailer spaces and 3 box truck parking spaces. Along the building addition, there were several improvements to the site's stormwater management system, in addition to repairing the curbing on site. Staff has been working diligently with the applicant. We've conducted several site visits. The site is built in conformance with the record plans. There were some minor deviations as to the utilities out in the field. All conditions has been satisfied. The Planning Board is holding $1,000 in surety in accordance with Condition 13 of the major modification decision. At this time, staff is recommending the Planning Board grant as-built approval and release all surety tied to this project with conditions 1, 5, 11, 12, 18, 23, 27, 31, 33, 34, and condition 35 remaining as surviving conditions.
thank you. If any of the members have any questions with that, Member McCamey?
Thank you. I know we had a lot of discussion about this project and there were changes, and you just said everything has been, all the conditions have been met.
Correct, yes.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Member Kent?
No questions?
Member Grove?
No, ma'am.
And Member Conley?
No, thank you.
Okay. And I don't have any questions either. So with that, I'll be looking for a motion on the request for as-built approval.
I'd like to move that we accept the request for as-built approval number 99-04, major modification for 100 Commerce Drive.
We have a motion by Member McCamey,
Second.
a second by Member Kent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
With this project.
Okay, and we'll be looking for a motion on the surety also.
I'll also move to, how do you want to word it?
Release the as-built surety.
Release the surety bond.
Thank you.
All right, motion by Member McCamey to release the as-built surety.
Second.
Second by Member Kent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Passes. Thank you. All right, moving right along, we have a discussion point for board member recusal procedures. Director Santucci-Rossi, would you like to speak on that one?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, we want to just remind the board members, if you are recusing yourself from a matter, the best way is to, if you know you have a conflict early on when the legal notice is sent out, or you're concerned about a conflict, to contact us. And if you are going to be recusing yourself due to a conflict, you need to remove yourself from the table and actually leave the room. So you can go sit in the B-cam room, or you can go out in the hallway, or go outside and take a break. But you should not be in the room in any manner that you could influence anything by moving your head or your body or anything like that. So we just wanted to remind the board members, and if anybody has any questions about recusal or any concerns that arise about conflict, they can contact us, and we typically vet that through town council and then advise the member on how to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I know one other discussion point, and in August, Member Grove had asked for a follow-up with the term expiration. Did you get the answer to your question you were looking for?
I forget what I requested last time. But, no.
Yeah.
I believe it was like additional clarity on the topic, and then possibly for council to
On
appear.
a statement that the town council made, yes. I believe I was looking for the legal case that allowed the term to extend.
Okay, all right, and you were still looking for
I
that?
haven't got that yet.
Yes, I would just ask if we can have that on the October agenda so that we can put the issue to rest.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next on our old new business is an update for the master plan. Director Santucci-Rossi,
Yep.
would you like to give an update on that?
Yep, just so to the board members and to those folks in the audience and following the master plan, we will have our next meeting next Thursday, and we're at the stages now where we're taking all the information, all the data, all the strategies and themes, and putting it into what will be known as the master plan. So making it look pretty, trying to make it user-friendly, and in a method that the data is well accessed by a variety of users. So I would encourage the planning board members, if they're interested, to attend. And I would have to double-check the schedule. I believe it's either November or December that it will be with the planning board for adoption.
Okay, great,
So once we have the draft of that all put together, we'll circulate that.
great. And the website is on the agenda, so I'd
Yes.
encourage anybody to take a look at the status and where we're at, and to pay attention and give your opinion on what's happening with that. And next on the update agenda is the MBTA community zoning. I know we were working on a planning board date for that meeting. Director Santucci-Rossi, do you have an update on that?
Yep, so, and I want to thank all the board members. I've sent out a couple different emails trying to schedule and coordinate. We're looking at October, let me just double check the date. October 26th, which was a Thursday, that all of the board members were available. I'll be having a draft in short order that I can circulate, and I would be looking for, and asking the planning board if they would sponsor the amendment.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is that a yes or a no?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, great. And I'm sorry,
And if
member-
anybody has any questions about that, just, you can contact me at the office.
Okay, excellent. And Member Kent, I know you're our planning board representative on the master plan. I skipped over you when we were on that section, but is there anything that you'd like to add?
And they've done a great job so far.
Great, great, thank you. All right, we have a couple more minutes before we can open up our first public hearing at 7:15. Just wants to hold tight. Yes. We have, oh, did we want to talk about the time frame?
Oh, yes,
That's
I'm
right.
sorry.
Thank you. Yes.
I've got, so yes, I had suggested 6, 6:30, or 7, whatever the board's comfortable with, just so we can make that, public and posted.
Okay. Member McCamey, do you have a preference on the starting time?
No.
Member Kent?
Nor I.
Member Grove? Okay.
7 o'clock would be preferable.
7?
Okay.
7? Sounds good.
7 it is.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you for reminding me.
Not a problem.
Yes. That was the was it the 26th?
Yep, it's Thursday, October 26th.
This is-
Okay, I
so-
won't be here.
You responded you would.
Oh, October, yes, I
Yes,
will.
October, not, the first one was September, yes, yes. And that's why I apologize for the confusion. I think it was the same date. So October 26th, and I'll confirm that with the time to all of the members as well.
Okay, great. So that'll be the meeting on the draft proposal for the MBT community zoning. So look for that also. Okay. Yep, and we still have a minute.
Madam Chair? I had
Yes.
a question for staff. Has there been an update on our new member?
I don't have any updates to share.
Thank you.
You can set your stuff up. Yeah, you'll be up in a couple.
All right, and it is now 7:15. So we will start our first public hearing for 22 Francine Road, Planning Board File 2306. Assistant Director Murphy, do you please read the notice into the record?
Certainly. Notice is given by the planning board under the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 48, Sections 11 in the Braintree zoning ordinance, Chapter 135, Article 5, 6, 11, and 12, that a public hearing will be conducted on Tuesday, September 12, 2023, at 7:15 p.m. in the Braintree Town Hall. The planning board will consider a grading permit application from the applicant, Andy Hung. The applicant is proposing to cut and fill in excess of 2 feet as part of a single-family dwelling reconstruction. The site is 10,133 square feet and has an address of 22 Francine Road, which is zoned Residence B as shown on Assessor's Plan 2087, Plot 56.
Thank you. And I see that we have your staff report dated September 6th. Could you give a little bit of a background on the application, or would you prefer the applicant to go first to describe it?
I could certainly give a brief background.
Okay, thank you.
We've been working with the applicant for several months now as part of this reconstruction. The applicant has triggered the need for a grading permit due to cuts and fills in excess of 2 feet. The cuts and fills of 2 feet can be found within the corner of the lot along Francine and Nicholas Road, which triggers the applicant to be here tonight. Staff is recommending approval with conditions which are found in the staff report. The conditions proposed are boilerplate conditions for a typical grading permit. There is one minor note I would make, and that is that staff has made it conditional that the applicant submit a revised set of plans to depict a construction access off of Francine Road.
All right, thank you. I see Mr. Mann here on behalf of the applicant. If you could just introduce yourself for the record and then please proceed.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Chi Man from Hardyman Engineering. With me tonight is my client, a homeowner, Andy Wong, who owns the properties. He purchased the properties with a single-family house, and he's wishing to demolish the existing house and for the growing families. With that, he's having kids and also having parents to be living with him, so he's looking for a bigger house. The new house is going to be a little bit shift over away from the neighbor, closer to the street side, and there's an existing driveway, which is where I'm pointing to. The new design of the house is going to be, we shift the driveway around to Nicholas Road side, so it's going to be drive-in, but also because of the grade, how to work out the building, the garage is going to be under the building, so that's the only area that we're proposing to do the grade change, which is to do a ramp driveway going down to enter into the garage. It's just barely over 2 feet, basically. That's triggered the grading permit. We are not planning to alter the grading of the existing site, with the exception that we have to cut the material here, and I think that's our calculation show about 100 yards, and we try to redistribute on site, so we're not expecting any export, except for any unsuitable material, maybe organics and stuff like that. Very simple projects, and we also get the comments from DPW. They would like us to bring in new services to the building, so we depict that on the plans as well, new 1-inch water and new 6-inch PVC. On the plan itself, this is a revised version. We actually add notes to call out using the existing driveway to be a construction entrance. And until that, it will be restored back to open space when the project is finished and close out the existing curb cut. And we added the construction entrance details as well. So taking consideration the staff recommendations, we will provide this plan to the staff for a final version for records. Other than that, I'm pretty much open for questions. Oh, the other thing I want to point out is the existing building has no stormwater control, and we are going to be at each corner of the building putting in something called flow well. It's a small dry well to catch all the runoff from the building. The calculation we show is we basically infiltrate 1 inch of impervious coverage of the site. So it's an improvement from the existing conditions, and also DPW, this letter described that we are not going to require stormwater permit neither. So.
And I know you mentioned it briefly, but so you're okay with the construction access revision that Assistant Director
It's
Murphy-
already depicted on the revised plan. We'll
okay.
provide a copy.
Great, thank you. All right, Member McCamey, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mann, since you're going to shift the house, are you putting in a new foundation? How does that going to work?
It's going to be new foundations.
It's going to be a brand-new foundation,
Yes,
okay, when you
yes,
shift it over? Okay.
Yes, it's different shape.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And since we're talking about the tree amendment tonight, are you disturbing any trees, cutting anything down?
We are cutting down one tree which is on the way of the proposed driveway, And we do have a landscaping plan submitted to show our proposed landscaping, showing new trees and also foundation planting.
Okay, very good.
And
Thank
that's
you,
on
sir.
the record.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Kent?
Just any input from the immediate abutter as to the
Excuse me?
project? Has the abutter, the next-door neighbor, been,
Well, we went through the CBA approval, and we basically met with CBA 2 or 3 times, and we revised the plans, adding landscaping and so forth to, you know, make the neighbors happy.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member Grove?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Connor, was any other relief granted by the ZBA?
Yes, they were granted a finding to reconstruct on an undersized lot.
Right, but anything beyond that?
No, that's all the relief that they required.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Conley?
No, thank you.
Okay. And I don't have any questions either. Thank you for the information.
And just want to add that we did review the draft conditions, and we do have one questions, comments per se, is the finishing date is March 12, 2024, which is not going to have enough time, so we request 2 years.
So what is it now? September of 2023, so you're looking for September 2025? Is that
Yes.
what you said? Okay. Assistant Director Murphy, do you have any thoughts on that date?
2 years is a long time, but if the board's comfortable with that, then I support the board's action.
Is,
Is just, I'm sorry, Madam Chair,
No,
just to
go ahead.
clarify, is that to complete the project?
Well, you know, the single-family house typical construction is a little over 1 year, so it's give us a little cushion.
I'm comfortable if it's to finish within 2 years.
okay. All right, so any other thoughts on the date? No. All right, so I guess we have correspondence, I believe, or no, maybe we don't. Do we have?
Prepared for tonight, but the last dated correspondence was the staff report on September 6th.
Okay. All right, so I guess with that, I'd be looking for a motion to enter the correspondence through September 6th into the record.
Since we have a crowd in the room, if there's anybody from the public.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you.
that would be great. Yes, this is a public hearing, so if there's anybody in the audience that has any thoughts or comments on the application, please come forward and state your name. Okay, all right, well, seeing none, we'll go back to my other. So we're looking for a motion on the correspondence through September 6th.
So move.
Motion by Member Kent,
Second.
second by Member McCamey. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now, looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Motion by Member Kent, second. Do we have-
Second.
Second by Member McCamey. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was all. And then I'll be looking for a motion on this grading permit.
So move.
So would that be a motion to approve the grading permit with the changes discussed at the
Couldn't have said
meeting?
it better myself.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. We've got a motion by Member Kent. Do we have a second?
Second.
I think that was a second by Member Grove. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No? Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. All right, and we have our second public hearing for 589 and 601 Granite Street.
Madam Chair, if I may? read legal
Yeah,
notice?
sorry, I was just giving a minute, but yes,
Okay.
if you could read the.
Notice is given by the Planning Board under the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 48, Sections 9 and 11, and the Braintree zoning bylaw, Chapter 135, Articles 5, 6, 7, 8, and 14, that a public hearing will be conducted on Tuesday, September 12, 2023, at 7:15 p.m. in the Braintree Town Hall. The Planning Board will consider a major modification of the watershed special permit and site plan review decision 11-02 and an application for new special permits for use restaurant and function conference facility. The applicant, Leo Keika, DBA Scutari Italian Restaurant, is proposing to operate a 14,000 plus or minus square foot 330-seat facility. The property is located at 508 and 601 Granite Street, contains 65,000 plus or minus square feet, is owned commercial and Residence B, and is shown on the Braintree Assessor's Plan 2048 as plots 14, 15B, and, 14D, 14, and 15B. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And apologies being a little discombobulated. We did get a lot of new material that I was trying to read through going into it.
Yes, and to the board members, the staff report was the staff report that was emailed over the weekend. I wanted to get it out to the board members. I did go back and proofread it and polish it, so it's just clerical and typos, nothing substantive. And then there was a response provided by the applicant that was also provided in your boxes, and then a little minor update to that memo late today that's highlighted with the update. So if you read the staff report over the weekend and you didn't get a chance to look at the proofed one, you just saw all my typos. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director. All right, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening. Michael Modestino, representing the applicant Leo Ketka, who's here with us today. Leo, why don't you stand up? This is an application to convert existing 16,000 square foot building that used to house the Dunkin' Donuts University training facility to a full-service restaurant and a function space as well for events, and with seating capacity of up to 303 people. Occupancy would be about 330, including the employees. There's 103 available parking spaces. There'll be some discussion about reducing that to 101, and that would be fine. And there's a purpose behind that, which will be discussed. And it requires 94 parking spaces to make this work. The petitioner is a local seasoned restaurant operator who owns 2 restaurants in Quincy, and he owns a restaurant in Hanover. He's going to make, if this is approved, a substantial financial investment in the town of Braintree. The change of use will also benefit the town through sales taxes, meals taxes, and by employment and jobs. I have Bob Michaud here from MDM, and he is ready to address the traffic issues involved. Obviously, in any type of operation like this, traffic is going to be a concern. So I'd ask Bob to come up here and explain what his findings are.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. For the record, Robert Michaud, principal with MDM Transportation Consultants based in Marlborough. Our firm has been involved with this particular driveway for many years. We were before this board in 2015 for the Goldfish Swim School, so we've got some historical background pre-pandemic to understand how all the pieces fit together. We, in 2015, actually had conducted counts of the driveway serving the mutual properties, the varying properties, and in 2017 published a transportation monitoring report, which we were obligated to do following the occupancy of that use, the Goldfish School. And we're pleased to say that the monitoring indicated that what we had predicted would happen actually did happen, and that the driveway amply served those uses, including the child care center and the Goldfish School, and at the time, the Dunkin' University. In 2023 of this year, we were approached to evaluate the impacts of converting that Dunkin' University to a restaurant use with function capability. And so we consulted with planning, with Melissa. on the protocols for evaluating that, and we turned back to the historic information, the pre-pandemic information under which all of the uses were active at their fullest extent to provide the baseline for the analysis. We also took a look at historical growth rates in and around the area, which are relatively flat, and so the basis of our analysis is still appropriate. The conversion itself is estimated to generate a net volume increase relative to the continued use as Duncan University of roughly 70 vehicle trips, just over 70 vehicle trips per hour. The vast majority of which will actually be inbound movements to the restaurant as opposed to outbound movements. So the driveway relative to today's condition and the conditions when Duncan was fully occupied and when the school is fully operational and Goldfish is fully operational is relatively minor. It's about 14 additional outbound trips under that weekday evening peak hour. When you get beyond the 6 p.m. hour, the uses, the school, Goldfish School, has reduced activity and the daycare is closed. So when the restaurant use has its higher level of activity, the driveway is relatively quiet, quite frankly. So the operational analysis that we did during that critical weekday evening peak hour indicates that the driveway and the intersection generally operates well below capacity with very little queuing. And that's a finding that's consistent with the 2017 monitoring report that we had prepared and submitted. The use was also evaluated under Saturday evening peak hour conditions as well, along with an operational analysis. It's during that period that the school, the daycare is not operational. The Goldfish School is. And the combination of trip activity there and the operation show the same result, that there's ample capacity at the driveway to accommodate the use with very limited on-site queuing and no real, what I call substantive impact to Granite Street itself. From an operational perspective, there aren't any high crash locations in and around the site, including Five Corners, that would be of concern or that would be materially impacted by the operation of the use. And that's essentially the finding of our what we call traffic statement. And I'd be glad to answer any specific questions this board might have.
Okay. I have a feeling there might be some, so if you don't mind staying up there. Member
Sure.
McCamey, do you have any traffic-related questions?
Not at this time.
Member Kent?
No, I think you've explained sort of the heavy traffic in and out of the restaurant wouldn't be a problem with respect to the daycare center, and that would certainly be a concern if that were not the case, so we're good.
Member Grove?
No, ma'am.
Member Conley?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. My questions really were the pre-pandemic levels. I know it was based on that, which I know a lot of the traffic studies are based on the pre-pandemic. But do you have any information about how those compare to current day traffic?
Yes. So we turned to MassDOT permanent count stations in and around the area, and they would include some of the arterials serving the area, 93, for instance, to see what the before and after volumes look like. The volumes have definitely bounced back pretty close to where they were pre-pandemic, but they've not exceeded them. And we know that from regional growth trends that are published by both MassDOT and regional planning that the growth factors in the area are relatively flat. You know, there's not a high growth in this particular area within Braintree. So the short answer is that the volume conditions that were surveyed in 2017 actually remain valid today. They are pre-pandemic. They do represent a peak operating condition for all of the uses that rely on the common driveway. And Granite Street itself is not subject to high fluctuation in traffic, simply because it already carries a lot of volume, which I'm sure the board can appreciate and experiences. We're not saying in here that there aren't delays in the area generally. We're not saying that at all. What we're saying is that the relative impact of this use from the conversion from Dunkin' to a restaurant will have a de minimis impact on the area roadways, given that the vast majority of trips will be inbound to the restaurant, will come from various directions, roughly equally split, east and west on Granite Street, and that represent a very small proportion of the already existing volumes in the area. You know, it's less than a 1% change. To the extent there are any delays, they occur on the driveway with very modest outbound volume during the critical peak hour, at 14 additional trips per hour. So relative to what you might see today, driving by the site at close to 5 or 6 p.m., those conditions really won't change materially. You won't notice a difference. You would see additional parking activity at the site because of the inbound volume. Saturdays are lower volume conditions generally, and the analysis shows the same operating condition under those weekend periods relative to the weekday. The weekday really is the controlling higher volume scenario.
Okay, and that, when I looked through it a little bit, it looked like weekdays at about 5 p.m. were the highest traffic counts on that roadway.
That's correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then as far as the Messina property across the street where Bertucci's and Panera is, are there any concerns with customers sort of cutting across there to avoid 5 corners?
Through the site, you mean, or?
Yeah, it's like a little bit of a off angle, but I don't know if that would be or not. I was just, as I was looking at where the curb cuts are, whether that was anything in your prior traffic studies, that was anything to be concerned with.
Right, we did look at safety trends for the area, including the most recent available crash data for that specific stretch of Granite, and nothing jumped out as being problematic. It is not a high crash location. And although there are multiple curb cuts in the area, some of which are not perfectly aligned one to the other, there aren't any trends within the safety analysis that we did that would indicate that that's a problem. And I believe, just as a practical matter, that folks who frequent this site or others are generally familiar with how these driveways are oriented and operate, and there's a certain familiarity factor that mitigates some of those offset locations that you mentioned. So nothing stood out as being problematic.
Okay, thank you. Just before I turn over, any other members have traffic-related questions that came up? No? Okay. All right,
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michaud. We also have Dana Altabello from Merrill Engineering and Surveying, and I'm going to ask him to come up now and address some of the issues as to the property, and there's one important issue about the vehicles, where they're going to park, where the curb cuts are going to be, and I would ask him to come up and address that.
Okay, thank you.
Flows from the front of the building towards a tree box filter, which is located in this area, of the southerly portion of the existing parking lot. There it is treated and then directed into a subsurface infiltration system. The new expanded parking area will kind of expand into this area, as you can see, down towards Granite Street. Stormwater will continue to flow from the front of the building and the southerly portion of the property into this, the tree box filter in this area, and there'll be a high point kind of in this area. Stormwater from the northerly portion of the site will be directed into a new bioretention area, which will treat the new stormwater for water quality and quantity, and then directed into the subsurface infiltration system as it currently is directed on site. The building, as you can see, is laid out with the new entrance in this area. There's an existing loading dock and the associated pavement for this, which will all be removed and replaced with this entrance, as well as some landscaping and some new walkways. 2 additional ADA compliant parking spaces are located on the site in this area, and the existing ADA parking spaces, which are currently in this area, have been relocated over here, so they're more accessible to this new entrance as it's laid out. We have also proposed 2 new parking spaces in the back for staff parking as well. We have proposed some modifications to the lighting, but there's no new lighting proposed on site. We're really just relocating the existing lighting, which is downward facing and shielded, so that it should all kind of look very similar to what it looks like now. They'll just be moved, where islands are being recreated in this area, we're shifting the entrance down a little bit to the west. And as we had discussed earlier, there were two or three, a third opening in this area, which has been closed based on the recommendation of Melissa, which we received over the weekend. We pulled away the turnaround in this area just to allow for cars to back out and easily make their way out of the parking area. And in doing that, we did lose 2 spaces, so we'll be at 101 spaces now currently. We have proposed landscaping throughout the site and throughout the proposed increased parking area or expanded parking area in this area. In total, 3 trees will be removed with a caliper greater than 8 inches. There were previously 4, but with the closing of that entrance, we were able to save 1 18-inch tree as well as a Coosa dogwood that was planted back in 2011 with the original reconfiguration. So with the elimination of 3 trees over 8 inches, we're proposing the planting of 9 new trees onto the site. We have added 1 in this area, 1 in the middle island here, and 1 kind of over in the front along Granite Street. We thought that was a good place to start. You know, if we looked at adding a second one in here, it seemed like it might get a little cramped with the tree canopies. Same thing over here. We didn't want to completely block the building. We tried to leave, you know, some view lines from the street. But if the board feels more required, we could certainly find some spots on site to add some new additional trees. I think that's pretty much it. We have received comments from Melissa on the staff comments as well as DPW, and we have prepared a response letter addressing all of those. We'll have a new set of revised plans as well as the stormwater report, which will also address any comments received tonight sometime in the near future. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything on the civil engineering side.
Okay, thank you. Member McCamey, anything site-wise?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Did I hear you say you're adding more parking, or what did I not hear correctly?
Yes, we're adding more parking, so we're adding an additional 35 spaces to accommodate the new restaurant and function rooms.
Okay.
In the site.
So the parking area on the right-hand side, that's what you're going to be adding?
So basically it expands from this,
Okay.
almost this area right here towards the street. We're basically adding this row right here and then just kind of reconfiguring and
Okay.
removing an existing island.
All right, thank you. And the number of parking spots is...
The existing right-of-way.
Okay. And again, I'm sorry, how many are you adding a curb cut? Did I hear that, or are you just moving it?
We're just moving one. We were adding, but that's been closed off of this parking aisle. So now we're just shifting this one down, or it's going a little bit to the west now from where it currently was.
Okay. And could you just show the board how the traffic is going to circulate? Just maybe move your finger around.
Sure.
Can you go around completely?
Yes, absolutely. You can come in as you come
So
up
if you were entering, how do you enter, and then where do you go?
Sure. Once you come in the existing right-of-way, if you have some people that have disabilities, you'd come in, you'd park over on the side over here, and that gives you access to accessible ramps into the front door, which is in this area. If it's a late night or you're early, you can come in and you can park right in front of the building in this area. And if you want to leave, or if you're not sure if there's a parking spot, there's a small car there. You can drive through here and get into the second levels of parking down in this area. Or additionally, if you come later, during peak hours, and this is all jammed up, so you can come right into this entrance in here and circulate wherever you can find a parking spot.
Okay. So that works, okay. And in terms of the building itself,
Sure.
are there going to be substantial changes to the building? I know you talked about the entrance. Or is the building going to be like completely changed?
The interior or the exterior?
I guess we'll start first with the exterior. I mean, is the footprint going to change?
Very little. As I mentioned, that there'll be a new entrance over here. It'll be kind of a a portico entry type scenario. It adds like an additional 14 square feet or something. It's a relatively small increase. And then once you get into the building, there will be substantial changes, just reorganization, but it's actually, because of the past uses, Duncan University, it's actually set up pretty well for a restaurant as far as I know. So I can let somebody else speak to that if you were looking for more detail on that.
Sure, okay. We'll wait on that then. My only other question is, are we going to keep the Duncan Drive name? I know that's not up to you, but it kind of sticks out.
It does. I can let maybe George or...
Yeah, I'm going to the Italian restaurant on Duncan Drive.
Well, it's been there for a long time, so I think we're going to leave it at Duncan's, a little homage.
Okay.
And Leo tells me on the menu, he's going to have some donuts for dessert, just nice additives.
Okay.
In terms of, for your earlier question, the exterior facade actually fits well with an Italian restaurant concept, so no major improvements to the exterior, and then some major renovations planned for the interior.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And Member Kent?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Is it envisioned that takeout or pickup or delivery would be a substantial portion of the business? And if so, would that affect parking?
Sorry about that. Hi. My name is Leo Keka. We don't do takeout or deliveries. Is that what your question was?
Okay. It was an issue in the pandemic, but then
We didn't do that
nobody
either.
was coming
We didn't do that
to the
either.
restaurant
Well,
anyway, so,
our
okay.
restaurant is based on the high-end products, which is don't travel, so we don't do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Grove? Oh, I'm sorry, Member Kent,
Thank
did
you,
you have any
Madam
other
Chairman.
questions?
I do not.
Okay,
Thank
sorry,
you.
Member Grove.
Thank you. Would Granite Street benefit at all by a turning lane leading up to the entrance of Dunkin' Donuts Drive?
That might be a better question for Bob. Bob,
Yep, that's
Michelle
fine.
could probably handle that.
As a matter of keeping the traffic flowing, 'cause that's a busy road.
Turning lanes are typically based on warrants, and they're based on volume of turns.
Yeah, okay.
And the volume of turns that are occurring at this driveway, when everything is active, when the daycare is active, when the Goldfish School is active, do not warrant that turn lane.
Okay,
So that really isn't something that's necessary.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Conley?
Thank you, Chair. I had a follow-up question from Member Grove's question. Was a no left turn considered there, either historically with Goldfish being permitted or for this use?
So, no left turns have never been a consideration. A turn restriction in and of itself on a roadway like Granite Street is very difficult to enforce, number one. And as a practical matter, folks, if that were to be the case, would find a way to reverse direction somehow, and it would cause a secondary effect that would not be good. And one of the reasons that we look at safety data, crash data, is to identify areas where, say, angle collisions happen at a higher rate than normal, that would be indicative of a problem for, say, a left turn, where people are becoming frustrated because they can't find a gap in traffic, so they take a shorter gap and cause a collision. The crash data that we looked at, which was for the last 5 years, does not indicate any trend like that. So my own experience with the driveway, our count information, we've got video of the driveway, does not suggest the need for that type of a restriction.
Thank you. And then just a comment, I appreciated the operational analysis because I think there is a good exchange between the daytime use of the school and the daycare and then the contrast where the general use of the restaurants in the evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And I didn't have any questions on the site itself either. I did notice the high TSS removal above and beyond, and I appreciated that. All right, Director Santucci-Razzi, do you want to go over your staff report at this
I can
point?
just quickly recap. I've prepared for the board and for the applicant this evening. We had issued in 2011 for the Dunkin' Donuts University a site plan review and a watershed special permit. So we're amending that watershed special permit because it's already on the site. Really not much to change on that end. Merrill and Dana and his crew did the work for the Dunkin' Donuts, and at the time, I actually went back and looked. All the numbers match up. They oversized the infiltration, and they introduced the tree box filter. And when we had talked about this round, we said, try to do something low impact out in the front as well, and Dana was able to take advantage of that existing infrastructure, which gets us that high level of TSS removal and kind of incorporating the bioretention area in the front with the landscaping, which is very similar to what's going on in front of the daycare and swim school. So that kind of front lawn area having somewhat of similar sort of drainage attributes and some landscaping. So you'll see the amended findings for the watershed special permit. Two new, excuse me, does someone say something? Oh. Two new special permits for the restaurant and then also the function conference facility. And essentially how I see this, oh, that was the noise, operating is the parking, it's overparked for the number of seats on the floor plan. There might be a little bit of flexibility in that floor plan or a little changes as Leo's sort of developing things. So there is the ability to increase the seats beyond what is shown on the floor plan. And I think the way to approach this is that's the number of seats, and it's sort of interchangeable, whether it's a function or it's the restaurant. The ability, if somebody wants the whole place, I want the restaurant for my cocktail hour, and then I want to go and or vice versa, flexibility in that nature. This particular situation is seated functions, as shown on the plans, so we feel comfortable parking it based on seats. Then we have some basic draft findings for the special permit criteria. And this is one of the uses that we recently put forward, and we know that we need the function facilities here in Braintree. And then most of the items in the site plan review analysis, Merrill Engineering, Mr. Altabello, has addressed in his memo that he put in today. And I asked him, don't revise the plans before the meeting in the event that some other things came up. Questions from the board members or the public that needed to be revised. We don't need to get multiple sets of plans. So we will just be cross-referencing his responses with the staff report and making sure all those items are addressed. We do have our new tree ordinance that will be on later this evening, but that has been advertised and the adjustments made. There are some really mature trees on this site. And saving the one by augmenting that one curb cut, achieve two things by one, saving that tree, and two, just reducing the amount of openings we have along the Dunkin' Donuts drive, which will help sort of the queuing and things flowing versus people trying to cut out very close to the intersection and to sort of keep that moving. People can go out the entrances that Dana had showed, and they can queue behind any vehicles that are already waiting to get out onto Granite Street. I don't have much else in the staff report. Like I said, most of the things, couple little housekeeping things in the drainage report that Dana's going to clean up. And then we get to the draft conditions, which a lot of them were in the original site plan review and watershed special permit. We've updated some of them. We've come a long way since 2011. We have our as-built requirements as always. We do talk about lighting. We talk about drainage, obviously, and erosion controls. And then we have some operational conditions, parking and circulation, and then some ongoing things related to deliveries, trash removal, and those types of items. I do need some numbers on fill quantities from Merrill Engineering. It might be a little bit balanced, but there is a little bit of grading going on to get that additional parking area in, so that's just supplying some numbers. And then we have some basic traffic conditions based on the memorandum prepared by MDM. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. All right, and I know we did get some response materials today and possibly yesterday, but do you want to respond to the staff report? Did you have a chance to look at it?
I
and
haven't
any
had the
additional
chance to look
comments?
at them.
The Merrill Engineering is what I was speaking of.
Oh,
that-
yes.
That we got today.
No,
I guess my question is, did you have any comments on the staff report? Or
No, I was satisfied with the staff report.
Okay,
And I appreciate the planning director's efforts at trying to get this done and to address all the issues involved.
okay. And it is a public hearing, so public will have a chance to weigh in if there's anybody who has any comments. Just going to turn it back to the board members, see if there's any general comments that have come up. Member McCamey?
Excuse me. Did we get any elevations plans? Yeah,
Elevations?
not yet.
We didn't, and again, I had gone over and did a site visit and whatnot, and speaking with Mr. Clements, and it really kind of has that sort of maize yellow colors. I don't think we really, I don't know if I've ever even looked over there, to be honest, like driving by. I'm not really focused on that particular site, but went over. They are going to be, the loading right now is kind of right in front of the building in a sunken sort of dock. That's all going to be filled in and landscaped, and you can see that green area, if Mr. Modestino wouldn't mind pointing. The green part in the cutout of the building. No, yep. That area will all be greened up. It's all hard now with a ramp and an overhead door. 8x10 portico, nice entryway. There might be some little trims and things like that, but the building on the exterior is actually in really good condition. Yeah.
Good, excellent.
Yep.
Since there's not going to be a lot of changes to the building, or there'll be some adjustments, seems like this project will go faster. So is there an estimate on what you're thinking in terms of getting it completed?
I think it's 6 to 8 months.
That's pretty fast. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Member Kent? Member Grove?
Oh, ma'am, thank you.
Member Conley?
I had a question on the operating hours in the staff report. There was a question to that. Is the staff agreeing with what the applicant suggested from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m.?
I think what we're going to do is we have the updated memo here that was given later today. We will just insert this right in there. That was their response, and that can go into the, I think the idea is that there might be the main, or at least my understanding is the main business is a dinner crowd, bereavements, luncheons, those types of things. I think that the operator wants to be able to accommodate those, which makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So now I'll see if there's any members of the public that have any comments on this project. Again, they address 589 and 601 Granite Street. Please introduce yourself for the record.
I will be glad to do so. I was hoping if there were any other comments, I was going to go last. Good evening, board members. My name is Margaret LaForest. For those I haven't had the opportunity to meet here in this format, I am the Mayor Kokoris's Chief of Staff and Director of Operations for the town of Braintree. I am here before you tonight expressing support on behalf of Mayor Kokoris. I think what's important to know, as soon as this project, the whispers were people seeing Leo Keka walk through the doors of Town Hall, and Fred Hansen here wrote his first article in the Patriot Ledger, boom, excitement in Braintree. The feedback on social media, right? Fred tells me one of the most hits articles has had in recent history. 1,000 likes, 101 comments, 84 shares. Everybody giving positive feedback. This is the type of business we want in Braintree, and Mayor Kokoris strongly agrees. Zoning Board unanimously approved this I think that was last week. Again, another article goes out, equally excited. Not only is it a great restaurant with a strong product, fine dining for Braintree, you're having Leo Keka, who sets the bar, not only for the product in his restaurant and quality of service that he's known for, but his corporate citizenship. Any community would be so benefit from his presence there, and we are so pleased that he has chosen to come to Braintree. I think we all feeling that we've heard the comments from this board when you passed the updated use table about the need, the Braintree and the entire South Shore, for function facilities. We've had big closures at Lantana's and Lombardo's. And I was just reminiscing how I remember when Jimbo's was at Braintree Five Corners. I think my wedding shower was there. But what a need to have, where is it that we're having for Braintree residents and for South Shore, having those family events and those milestones. We see this as really filling that void. I appreciate your comment about the operating hours. To us, that makes absolute sense too, right? That we do not want to be here restricting businesses from what they are able to do and the flexibility of operating. I did speak to our town clerk, Jim Casey, about how when he's issuing his common victual license and the liquor license, it's going to have that concurrent 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. hours. So just to clarify that, I appreciate the board's understanding of that. And, really, truly, the only problem I see here is that we need people to not Google Alba Braintree. We have a new name here, Scutari. So I respectfully ask for your consideration and full support on behalf of Mayor Kokoris for this project. And the swift approval in response time has been terrific, and we appreciate being able to get this done this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to speak on this project? Okay, and so just so I understand where we are, we have the draft conditions, we have some responses that we received today from the applicant's engineering team, and we have what we can look at, an updated plan that will be submitted and incorporated in the conditions if the vote goes forward. Is that a correct summary?
Or so, and we'll just make sure everything's in order, and in the meantime, we'll be reformatting the staff report into a decision. Once we get the plan, we drop the date in, and we'll file it.
Okay, thank you. So I know, and I'll ask other members for any comments. I know from my perspective, it makes it a little bit difficult when we get materials this close to the meeting and trying to understand and making sure that we're protecting Braintree. But on the other hand, I think we are all very excited to have a well-known and successful operator coming to town. And I do thank the applicant team for responding quickly to all of the comments and providing the traffic information so that we can look and at least from my perspective, make sure that we have the information that we need to make a decision. So I did just want to make that comment. And before we move on to anything else, I just want to see if any other members have any additional comments. No. Okay. Well, with that, I see we have a correspondence list that has correspondence through September 12th, and looking for a motion to enter that into the record. All right, we have a motion by Member Grove.
Second?
A second by Member Kent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Motion by Member Kent, second by Member Grove. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then with that, the application before us is for site plan review and 2 special permits. And be looking for a motion on that application.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the site plan review and the special permits, Planning Board File 11-02, 589 and 601 Granite Street.
And
Second.
With the final conditions to come.
okay, so we have a motion by Member McCamey
Second.
and a second by Member Grove. And just to confirm for the record, does the motion include the updated hours, the 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. hours that were discussed on the record?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Madam Chairman, can we have 5 minutes?
5 minutes?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, we can take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, we have a PowerPoint. What's that? Oh, there is? I didn't know that. Oh. Oh.
Slowly but surely. Yeah, he's not quite up to speed yet, but no, it's going good. He's getting rolling. There's a learning curve. Yeah, yeah. And his partner in it is sort of all over. So it's sort of figuring each other out. Like junker removal, maintenance services. So his buddy has a demolition company. Ramping up, so that was really try to really grow it and get some more bigger contracts.
They do bigger things, they want them household.
Yeah, they would be households, but they're targeting hotels and apartment buildings and stuff like that. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. Move on to our third new public hearing, which is a zoning ordinance, text amendments related to tree protection. If I could ask the director to read the public notice into the record.
Oh, sorry. Notice is given by the planning board under the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Sections 5 and 11, and the Braintree zoning ordinance, Chapter 135, Articles 7 and 15, that a public hearing will be conducted on Tuesday, September 12, 2023, at 7:15 p.m. in the Braintree Town Hall. The planning board will provide a recommendation to the town council on order number 23-051, sponsored by the Braintree Town Council. Said order requests zoning ordinance text amendments to Section 135-702 and 135-711. The text amendments are related to tree protection, procedures, review, and plan requirements.
All right, thank you. And I see Council President Burica is here. Just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Thank you, Chair Croha. Meredith Barica, President of the Braintree Town Council, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Town Council. Thank you, and thank you to members of the board. I have a short prepared statement about this proposal that is coming to you from the Town Council. I'd first like to thank Mayor Kokoros, Director Santucci Razi, Solicitor Huff, the DPW Director Jim Arsenal, Assistant DPW Director Ben Hulk, and my colleagues on the council for their support of this amendment in particular and tree protection in Braintree in general. So just by way of background, on July 18th, 2023, the Braintree Town Council voted unanimously to sponsor this proposed zoning ordinance amendment pertaining to tree protection in the town of Braintree. This is the third and final component of a tree protection ordinance, which is now General Ordinance Chapter 12.30. The first part applied to public trees on the public way. That was passed unanimously by the council on April 25th, 2023. The second component created a revolving fund to eventually fund replacement trees. That was also passed unanimously by the council on June 6th, 2023. This proposed zoning amendment is part 3, and it pertains to developers and new developments. In working on the tree protection ordinance during 2021 and 2022, the planning director and town solicitor recommended incorporating this third component of the ordinance into the planning board's site plan review process, which requires this zoning amendment. In short, the amendment aims to ensure that developers who are cutting trees or clearing land for new projects are accountable to preserve, replace, or pay for the removal of the trees as they're defined in the ordinance. And just to point out 3 of sort of the notable amendments or changes to this amendment, because it is a lot to get through for members of the public who might be reading through it all. This requires a formal tree protection plan in addition to a landscaping plan. All trees removed within 18 months or proposed to be removed as part of a development shall be replanted on the property at a 1-to-1 ratio. And if that is unable to be achieved, the applicant shall then be required to make a payment in lieu of replacement. And finally, the replacement trees are specified to be non-cultivar native species. So on behalf of the council as the sponsoring body, I thank the planning board for its attention to this environmental initiative and request a favorable recommendation to the council for this amendment. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you again for the time.
All right, thank you, Councilor Baraka. Director Santucci-Rossi, do you want to add anything from your staff report?
No, I just want to thank Council Baraka for kind of getting this going. It was definitely a team effort. My portion, there was a lot of talking in the beginning and then kind of separated out. My sort of task was to do the zoning portion of it. So we took a look and said, how can we weave something into something that already exists or clarify a particular section? And I think this board knows that we do a little bit of this anyways in a lot of our developments. The grading permit section is a little bit more involved in some of that stuff, which kind of, I think that maybe there's going to be some future discussions because that applies to single-family homes. I want the board to know this does not apply to single-family homes. So it applies to, the only setting it would really apply in residential would be for multifamily or the actual clearing associated with a subdivision that might help save trees but might not, because the developer would just leave them and then sell the lot, and it would be a single-family lot, and then you would come along and clear a lot of them. So maybe some future things to think about and ways to kind of eliminate loopholes and workarounds, because we know people love those. So went into section 135-702 and took the landscaping plan and kind of, went behind that and said, okay, add in the tree protection stuff, reference the general ordinance that has all the tree lists in there of what we want planted for native species. And then the other change was in section 135-711, which is our site plan requirements. And that was a very small change that changed the H, which was landscaping. We added landscaping and tree protection plans. So really kind of perfecting and creating a level floor for tree protection and removal in the community across the board. I do have 2 amendments proposed. There was one thing in the draft about where we were going to measure the caliper of trees, and we actually defaulted to our unofficial, official Conservation Commission member, unofficial tree warden, excellent resident, Chris Haywood. So Kelly had reached out to him and he gave us some guidance. That's revision number 2. And then the first one is not only do we want this applied to the special permit site plan review, but let's just add the definitive subdivision application in here as well, because there's parts of the subdivision rules and regs that reference the zoning bylaw and kind of cross-reference as general practice, tree removal, stormwater, those types of things. So just wanted to make sure we covered the bases there, and obviously recommending that the board would send a favorable recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Member McCamey, do you have any questions or comments?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. If compensation was paid into the fund, I'm going to assume per tree, what kind of compensation would that be?
Yep, I can answer that. So that is spelled out in the ordinance. So payment in lieu of replacement is to be in an amount equivalent to the cost of purchasing, planting, watering, and maintaining the replacement trees for a period of not less than 18 months. So we didn't want to set a dollar figure because that can fluctuate
Right,
given
yeah.
species, time, and all of that. So it will be incumbent upon the proponent to provide a dollar.
That's good. Yeah. I don't have any other questions, Madam Chair. I think this is a very good amendment.
Okay. Member Kami. Member Kami.
No questions.
Member Grove.
Madam Chair, I echo Member McCarthy's statement that this is fairly thorough. It's good.
Thank you. Member Conley.
Yes, please. I have a question about the payment. What is the threshold for that? Is it just to the extent practical?
So I would default to the council president. That's actually in the general so there's the general ordinance, there's the fund, and then this is the zoning piece. I don't really think there's a floor or a ceiling. I can tell you that a recent development that was subject to the conservation tree planting policy, which is already in place but only applies within the jurisdictional areas of conservation in the buffer zone, that payment, I believe, was about $156,000. So there's an advantage to planting the trees, but in some situations, it's just not going to be feasible. On some of the smaller properties, maybe in the squares and things like that, but that's when we'll have the fund, and then the town can go out and supplement those in maybe some town-owned properties along the trees, maybe even on other properties in those areas that can actually support the plantings.
And does the town have an administrative capacity for that fund?
I would default to that won't be us.
Yep, I can answer that. So the tree revolving fund was established by the council back in June, and it's a set-aside fund. It will be administered by the tree committee, which is also established by the new ordinance. So, and that will be help administered by the DPW director and/or conservation planner or her designee.
Thank you. And then just a comment. I think this is tremendous for preserving our landscape and really appreciate the efforts of the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know you've been working hard on this for a long time. I had a couple questions, comments. Has the tree committee been started since the general ordinance was put into effect?
That has not been established yet. I think the chief of staff had to depart. So that will be like all of our committees and boards appointed by the mayor. And assume that will get rolling once this final component gets completed.
Okay. And some of the definitions are cross-referenced, but the 1-to-1 ratio sort of appears from the language that it would apply to 8-inch tree diameters. And I just thought it might be more clear if we could cross-reference the diameter at breast height definition in the general ordinance to make it more clear what level of trees were required to get replaced. So it's in the 1-to-1 requirement is in the submission requirement section, and I didn't actually see it in the standards, but I think it's fairly clear, but just if it wasn't, that might.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, are you looking at the zoning or the general?
I'm looking at the zoning.
Okay.
But the zoning just says all trees removed within 18 months or proposed to be removed as part of a development shall be replanted on the property at a 1-to-1 ratio.
Are you in 3B4?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I
And
just
so
thought
add in
defining
8.
that trees might be helpful.
The other thing that we use caliper and we use diameter, and it's kind of interchanges a little bit. I'm just kind of thinking now that you've mentioned that. That's, so diameter, breast height, actually, that's different than the caliper when you plant. So the number 4 is the 8 inches, 4.5 feet above. Okay, so
Yes.
I'm just gonna make a note here.
That's the definition
Yeah.
in the ordinance, the general
Yep.
ordinance.
So I could say 8 inches in accordance with the definition in the, yeah, and in the beginning, because I didn't want to add all these I said for the definitions to check the general one. So I'll make sure that that section says 8 inches and then references this definition.
Okay, great.
Yep, thank you.
And then the only other thing is that as far as if it was a big site, if there was not necessarily a waiver, but possibly an exception, if there's diseased trees or trees that aren't really viable, I don't know if that would fit within the definition of tree under the ordinance.
Like they're
or
already
whatever.
dead, but they're
Right,
huge.
right, yeah.
There are
Right.
a lot of those.
If I may, Madam Chair, invasive species are exempt from this general ordinance, and so they would be exempt from this as well. Doesn't speak to the health of the trees, but just to clarify for the board, invasive species are excluded from the protection because they're invasive.
Okay. Yeah, so that might need to be added into the zoning also. I see that in the general,
Yep.
but that was some of the definitions are applicable to public property, so they don't necessarily translate, but I think that answers the question. So
Okay.
if we can just cross-reference that part also. And those are really all my questions. So I too think it's the efforts that you've done both townwide and property-wide. You can tell that you've put a lot of effort into it, so thank you for that. So it is a public hearing. If there's anybody in the public who'd like to speak on the tree ordinance, now's your chance. Okay. All right, so with that, it's a zoning ordinance, so we as a planning board are asked to make a recommendation to town council on the proposed ordinance. And I guess first I'll be looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion by member Grove, a second by member Kent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then be looking for a motion on the recommendation itself.
Motion to recommend favorable action.
Okay, got a motion by member Grove. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by member Conley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, yes.
The two things that we discussed this evening under the staff recommendation portion when the report's forwarded to the council.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. That brings us to the last item, the continued public hearing for 125 Union Street. Okay. What is this? All right, Assistant Director, oh, we don't have to read a public notice. Never mind, sorry. All right.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Frank Marinelli, do you want me to go ahead, or did you want?
Yes, yeah, just pull
Okay.
the microphone a little bit closer.
Sure.
A little hard to hear.
For the record, Frank Marinelli, lifelong resident of Braintree, with my office at 439 Washington Street. The staff had requested, since it's been a number of months with the peer reviews and so forth, that we give a summary of the project. So if you'll indulge us, we do have a PowerPoint, and we'll start the slides after I give a few opening remarks. I represent Torrington Properties, one of the region's premier developers, with a quality real estate portfolio of over $500 million, the type of grade A owner and developer that we need here in Braintree. Through this redevelopment, Torrington will not only be investing millions of dollars to redevelop the Motel 6 site that was purchased in 2022, But Torrington is also investing approximately $1 million in off-site road and intersection improvements to better existing conditions. Torrington is transforming an eyesore at the entry of our town with uses by right under zoning, eliminating nonconformities, and installing rich landscaping with over 600 plantings. Just heard about the tree ordinance. We have 32 trees, plus we have 3 others that we're putting in the cement island on Union Street for beautification. Plus we have 352 shrubs. The redevelopment is itself tremendous mitigation at Braintree's Gateway. With me is our development team, Pete Doucette of Torrington, Greg DeBona and Joe Fonseca of Bowler Engineering, Jeff Dirk, PE of VAI Transportation Engineers and Planners, and also Clint Matson of Chick-fil-A Corporate. The zoning process is site plan review. Torrington's proposed 2 tenants are 2 uses by right in the highway business zone. Chick-fil-A, a fast food restaurant, and Brookline Bank, both notable brands and both uses by right under Section 601, the Table of Uses of the Braintree zoning bylaws. Site plan review law is as follows. Prudential versus Westwood provides that site plan approval shall be granted for uses by right with or without reasonable conditions. As stated in Bobrowski Mass Land Use Handbook, page 9-22, quote, under Prudential, site plan review has been confirmed as regulation of a use rather than its prohibition, end quote. It is not the discretion of a special permit. In Prudential versus Westwood, an office building was a use by right. The court stated, quote, the concepts of a use of right and a use dependent on discretion are mutually exclusive, end quote. In Prudential, as here, discretion or preference, subjective preference on use is not involved with uses by right. The town leadership needs to work with the applicant to approve a redevelopment of the deplorable Motel 6 site with reasonable conditions. Site plan review is about property rights, procedures under the Zoning Act, and it's not political. This is a fundamental property right issue with uses by right. Torrington purchased the site in 2022. The current mayor told us that he did not want special permit housing or any housing. Torrington complied. The current mayor wanted these uses by right that are being presented, and they were presented to the mayor in October of 2022, before Torrington even filed for approvals. Torrington then went to the zoning board in early 2023 for improvement of setbacks. The Chick-fil-A drive-through canopies set back further than the prior motel and the prior Bickfords were, of course, approved by the zoning board. They're an improvement. Torrington then filed with the planning board for site plan review. Torrington has done everything openly and transparently. Real estate development is market-driven. Was there a demand for another hotel as a use by right at the site? No. Was there a demand for a flower shop, a Winston's or a Trader Joe's at the site? No. Was there demand for life science that is often touted here in Braintree as a hope for Braintree? No. The demand for 2 small buildings, 2 notable brands with aesthetic landscaping, over 600 new plantings. Now, folks can speculate about what they'd prefer to have, but the blight would remain because no demolition occurs without approved redevelopment, and that blight would be on the town. The Zoning Act defines parties in interest as abutters and abutters to the site. There are no residential abutters whatsoever. There are no residential parties in interest. There are 18 abutters or parties in interest. 14 are governmental entities, the MBTA or the town of Braintree. The other 4, or 22%, are commercial, industrial property owners. You will hear from VAI traffic engineer Jeff Dirk. Over the past months, VAI has comprehensively studied and restudied the intersections expanded the studies, studied the rotary, the ramps. The town's peer reviewer, Ty and Bond, has also studied and commented on the traffic assessment and VAI's data. There have been approximately 4 rounds of reports and responses since December 2022 and through August 2023. The experts are in agreement that the redevelopment can move forward with recommendations that you will hear from them. Torrington led the way on MassDOT. Jeff Dirk, PE, will tell you that the transportation impact assessments were prepared in consultation with the town and MassDOT and in accordance with MassDOT guidelines. We will follow the recommendations that come out of MassDOT, including as concerns the off-ramp. The local approval is made subject to such other conditions as MassDOT requires. Jeff Dirk will also talk about the agreed improvements at Union and Ivory, which include no U-turn at Union Street. Union Street westbound vehicles wanting to enter Chick-fil-A will turn left onto Ivory Street with clear directional signage and then into a dedicated turn lane off of Ivory Street southbound to make a U-turn back to Union Street and a right-hand turn into the site. The site then has stacking capacity of over 60 vehicles, probably more than any fast food site in the area or anywhere that I've seen. So it lends itself to substantial stacking capacity with over 440 feet, about 440 feet of frontage. The traffic presentation will demonstrate that the project does not result in a significant increase on motorist delay or vehicle queuing over anticipated future conditions without the project. Clint Matson is here from Chick-fil-A Corporate, and Clint will describe the comprehensive opening week's procedures, mitigation including police details, and the highly trained Chick-fil-A employees that are highly regarded in the industry, including for friendliness and efficiency. Demand for Chick-fil-A does attenuate over time from the opening weeks, as it has attenuated in Hanover and in Dedham, the closest to Braintree. We heard a lot about trees tonight, and good developers create aesthetic places that people want to visit. Here, the currently blighted site will be transformed and beautified with 600-plus plantings. Again, Torrington led the way, increasing the open space and making open space conforming to zoning. It wasn't conforming to zoning with the motel use. Torrington will also include, as I said, public way beautification at the Union Street concrete island, which was requested by planting trees there. Torrington does not create a heat island. The asphalt in the Union, Grossman, Ivory Street area has existed for decades. Torrington actually reduces impervious surface. Torrington reduces the pavement or impervious surface on the site by 5.5% and increases open space by 5.5%. Let's go to the first slide. It shows the data. There you have the data, a 2.08 acre site, substantial depth of width on site, 2 very small buildings for the site. Down in the corner, you see the data on the buildings as compared to the building mass that's currently on the site. Currently on the site, you have over 40,000 square feet of building mass. The total building mass with 2 very modest buildings will be less than 20% of the building mass that's out there right now. And there'll be over 600 plantings and landscaping. Next slide, please, is the existing eyesore conditions. The next slide is the existing conditions before development. The next slide is post-development from the same Union Street perspective. The next slide is existing conditions looking from the Grossman Drive area across the intersection. Next slide is the post-development perspective of the same area. The next slide shows what will be done with the blighted signature corner, which has existed for over 6 years. It will be made aesthetic, and again, planting trees, 2 small buildings, and shows the 2-lane stacking extending the entire width of the site, some 422 feet. So when you come in, you'll take a right, You can flow around either into the bank drive-through, or there's a double stacking lane, probably one of the longest that you see with any kind of fast food use, and then around the building. And of course, all of the order takers, as Clint will describe, are in the drive-through. If you've ever been through one, it is very efficient, very friendly, and they do a great job. They're well-trained. The next slide shows the parking, and we're not creating a heat island. To the contrary, we're removing 5.5% impervious pavement and increasing open space by 5.5%. It's a family-friendly restaurant with over 70 seats, plus a double drive-through. Even though parking is shown as 80 complying spaces with zoning, it cuts the existing parking by 33%. The existing parking is about 120 parking spaces out at the motels and Bickfords. So that's cut down to 80 spaces. The next slide, please, shows the important zoning analysis. We increased the open space by 5.5%. It was 20%. We increased it to 25.5%. We make it conforming to zoning. It was not conforming to zoning. That is mitigation to a previously non-conforming site. Lot coverage is non-conforming currently at 80%. We reduce it by 5.5%. We make it conforming to zoning, thereby completely mitigating the non-conforming lot coverage. We almost cut building footprint in half. If you look at building coverage, the current building footprints are 23%. Our relatively small buildings have footprints of just 12.1%, almost half as much. The next slide, please. The Chick-fil-A facades are neat, clean lines, state-of-the-art design, nice color palette, brand new, and small compared to the current old building mass that is over 7 times greater than this building shown on the exhibit. And it's a well-known high-end brand. The next slide is Brookline Bank. Again, a lot of glass, nice logo. This bank is well-known, and again, a significant brand. The existing motel building mass and combined with Bickford's is almost 16 times the size of this modest bank. Next slide, please. This shows further improvement on things that are unrelated to zoning and beautification. This shows significant compensatory flood storage, increase in compensatory flood storage, and a first floor elevation that's above the flood elevation. Next slide, please. Another improvement. There is no stormwater management or treatment, and we all care about the environment at the site. This is a fantastic environmental improvement to provide a new subsurface infiltration detention system close to the Manatequit River Basin, 2 water quality units and catch basins with deep sumps. This is the type of stormwater management and treatment improvement and replacement that the town and the Stormwater Division welcome. Next slide, please. Shows just the utilities plans and the way the utilities are mapped on the site. Next slide is the photometric plan, which is dark sky compliant. And the next slide shows the abundant landscaping being provided, over 600 plus plantings, detailed in the upper left-hand corner, 32 trees, plus the 3 that we're putting in the Union Street Island, 352 shrubs, 265 ground cover and perennials. And that's all part of the improvements, again, increasing 5.5% open space, decreasing impervious. This next slide shows the turning movements and the ability of trucks to enter the site. Deliveries will be during off-business and off-peak hours. The next slide shows the fire truck template, and that there is access and circulation in case of emergency. Jeff Dirk will now address the peer-reviewed traffic impact assessments, and then we'd ask for staff and the board to consider allowing staff to work on conditions for this use by right development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm the managing partner with Vanessa and Associates. And as you heard, we're the transportation consultants on the project. So I do have a few slides to go through with you. The last set of slides, we're going to focus in on the access configuration for the project. And really, that's what we've been focused on for the past several months. And I think just at the outset, the original access plan that was presented to you really wasn't ready for prime time. And I'll talk a little bit about why that plan didn't work and why we are at the configuration that we presented to you tonight, which, as you heard from our attorney, has been something that's been vetted by the peer review consultant, as well as we received some, I would say, some very substantive and probing questions and comments from both the staff as well as from the town council president and the district councilor for this area. And I think, frankly, it's resulted in a much better plan. And I think the plan I'm going to present to you tonight, through all of those iterations and the feedback that we've received, really results in a betterment for traffic flow. It's a better access configuration for the project site. But I think in terms of, as we're typically talking to you about comparison to no-build conditions, with the improvements that you've heard mentioned, we're actually able to have an intersection that functions similar to the way it functions today, with a betterment in terms of access. So typically I'd be saying to you, we're able to mitigate back to no-build conditions. In this case, we're actually able to mitigate back to today's conditions, looking 7 years in the future with the construction of this project. So that in and of itself is a significant betterment in terms of traffic flow in the area. So in terms of the overall findings of the assessment, as you heard mentioned, the study was prepared in close consultation with the town, as well as with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And they really set the standards that we have to follow in conducting this assessment, and then your local staff and the peer review consultant ensure that we're addressing Braintree-specific concerns as they relate to study area, as well as traffic flow and accessibility in this area. With respect to the findings of the assessment, as I mentioned, with the planned improvements that we're going to undertake, and I will speak about that in a few minutes, we are able to replicate existing conditions. So in fact, as we look at the impacts of this project, before and after the project, there will actually be an improvement as a result of the improvements, even with the additional traffic that will be generated by this project. And again, I'll speak about that in a minute. As it relates to the access and circulation within the site, I think you saw kind of the truck circulation, but I think as we're looking at it, it's really the two components. It's not only the circulation and making sure emergency vehicles can get into and circulate within the site, but also we're looking at the queuing. We have two facilities that have drive-through facilities, so we want to make sure that the queuing related to those facilities doesn't interfere with the circulation patterns that you saw, so that to the extent that there is an emergency during business hours, that the queuing that happens can be contained in a manner that you can still get a fire truck into the site and circulate. So as you heard mentioned, as it relates to the Chick-fil-A, which is the use that would have the more extended queuing within the site and the drive-through facility can accommodate somewhere between 55 and 60 vehicles, and that differentiation in terms of the range has to do with obviously the sizes of vehicles. So 55 vehicles would be if all the vehicles were type of an SUV, but when we have a mixed traffic stream in there, you could get up to about 60 vehicles with a mix of SUVs and compact cars. That's why we give you that range of about 55 to 60 vehicles. As a part of the analysis that we've undertaken as it relates to the Chick-fil-A, when we look at transportation or traffic numbers, trip generation related to it, and the drive-through queuing, we've come up with those numbers based on measurements at actual facilities. So we're not going into the Institute of Transportation Engineers generic data. For this use in particular, we've actually observed 4 locations to come up with not only the traffic volumes, but also the queuing that goes along with that. Hanover being one, and that's probably the closest one to Braintree, where we observed those, the operations. So the queuing at those facilities did not exceed 24 vehicles. That was the maximum during those time periods. So again, we have a facility that accommodates twice the maximum queue that we observed at those restaurants. And we think, frankly, that's warranted. It's warranted because of what you heard is that initial operating condition. And the last thing that we want to have, or that you want to have, is to have a condition where the site can't handle that initial opening, even though we have a detailed management plan that deals with it. You know, if everything settles out as we expect, then the queue facility in there will be more than what's actually needed. But we think that's proper design as it relates to this site, given, as you heard, the entrance into Braintree, but also the dynamics that we have here. We're very close to the interchange. We have the rotary, and we have the signal at the Ivory Street intersection, all of which create a dynamic in terms of the traffic flow that if that doesn't work, it quickly reverberates into backups, not only within the rotary, but up onto the highway, and that's something that we're sensitive to as well. In terms of looking at safety, there are no high crash locations as they exist along Union Street between the rotary and including the rotary extending up to Washington Street, and then along Ivory Street from Pearl Street up to the intersection with Union Street. So that's something that we verified both with respect to the Mass DOT data, but also looking at number of crashes that are happening at these intersections. And then lastly, lines of sight at the driveway. I know you're very familiar with this, this location in particular, relatively level and flat, so the sight lines that you have are superior. You can see straight out to the rotary, and then if you look in the other direction, the only impediment to the sight lines looking toward Washington Street is actually the hill as you come underneath the bridge from the railroad track. So the sight lines far exceed what's needed for the driveway to function in a safe manner. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows the overall context of the project site. So the site is shown in yellow on the slide. You see the MBTA station just to the west of where the project site is shown. And Union Street runs basically through the center of the slide. And of course, you can see the rotary and Route 3 to the east of the location. Next slide, please. This slide shows the study area that we evaluated in the transportation assessment. So it's essentially Union Street from Washington Street to and including the rotary, the on and off ramps to Route 3, and then the entirety of the Ivory Street corridor stretching from Gross Run Drive down to Pearl Street. The other thing I want to point out in the slide here are basically two things. The first is where you see the orange lines. That's where there are existing sidewalks. And then importantly, as you look at the Grossman Drive intersection, where you see the blue lines, that's where there are crosswalks. And of course, as you look at it, what's markedly missing at the Grossman Drive intersection is any ability to be able to cross from the west side of Ivory or Union Street to where the project site is located. So that was an area that we focused in on in terms of mobility, understanding that if people are coming from the MBTA station and they want to walk over to go to the bank or to go to Chick-fil-A, there's not that direct pedestrian connection that exists there. So that's something that we focused in on with the improvements that are associated with the project, which does have some ramifications as it relates to the operations of the traffic signal, because we have an additional phase essentially that needs to be added for that crossing. Next slide, please. So this slide is the anticipated traffic characteristics of the project, and what I've highlighted in yellow on the far right-hand side is what the net new traffic is as a result of the project. As you might imagine, there's a significant amount of traffic associated with both the bank use, but mostly the Chick-fil-A use. That is what we call either pass-by trips or diverted linked trips. So a pass-by trip is probably something that you're most familiar with, which is I'm driving by the site, I see Chick-fil-A and I want to stop in there, and I'm going someplace else. So let's say I'm traveling from my house to work and I want to swing in and grab a sandwich, let's say. I would do that trip, come into the site, pick up my sandwich, and then leave and then continue on to my original destination. So that's not a new trip, and it's passed by because you've driven by the site you'd be going by anyways, and then you want to come in and pick up a sandwich. The second piece is what's known as, I mentioned, diverted linked trips. So this is a trip that, as it implies, it requires you to divert from your original traveled way. So if I'm on Route 3, let's say, and I'm continuing into Boston, and I know Chick-fil-A is here, and I want to grab a sandwich and then get back on the highway and continue into Boston. I am driving by the site on Route 3, but in order to get here, I physically have to get off the highway, and I wouldn't normally do that, and then go into the site. So as it relates to Union Street and the driveway, it's a new trip that wouldn't otherwise be in the area because you have to get off and divert from your original travel route, and then you go back. So a significant portion of the trips are either pass-by or diverted link trips. Once we've removed those trips, what's shown in the yellow is the net new traffic that we're expecting. So on a daily basis, we're expecting there'll be an additional 2,568 vehicle trips, two-way traffic going in and out of the project site over the operational day of the facility. During the peak hours, so the highest traffic volume in the hour of the morning, the project would generate about 63 net new vehicle trips. Most of that obviously is for the bank because Chick-fil-A at this location isn't serving necessarily breakfast, so those numbers are lower and primarily employees or bank-related traffic. During the evening peak hour, we're expecting a net of about 203 new vehicle trips. And then on a Saturday during the peak hour, we're expecting about 299 vehicle trips. So Saturday is actually when we're expecting the highest level of traffic in this area as it relates to the project site. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how that net new traffic is dispersed onto the roadway network. So again, a significant amount of the traffic is already out there or is diverted to come into the project site. And then this is the distribution of that net new traffic as it's coming into the area. So as you're looking at this, about 30% of the traffic is on Washington Street, so it'll be coming in basically in an eastbound direction, coming in, leaving in a westbound direction. We have about 25% that is to and from the south on Ivory Street. And then the balance of the traffic, so we've got 20, 30, about 45% is oriented to and from the east. The majority of that 30% is to and from the highway. Important as you look at the access into the project site, because it's right in, right out, 100% of the traffic has to turn right coming out, go through the rotary, and then it disperses itself from there. But all of the traffic has to exit and turn right as it's coming out of the site. Traffic coming into the site depends on your directionality, and we'll talk about how that access configuration would work. But just focusing in on that for a moment, if you look at the traffic that is coming to and from the east of the project site, so again, about 45% of that traffic is coming to and from the east, it needs to make a turn at the Union Ivory Street intersection. So that 45% of the traffic, as we're looking at somewhere between 200 to 300 net new trips at that intersection, that's a large increase in terms of accommodating it in the left turn lanes that exists at the Ivory Street, Union Street intersection. And for that reason, that's why, as we looked at various access configurations, a U-turn maneuver to accommodate that volume of traffic is not something that signalized intersection can accommodate. So we have to look at a solution that involves not using the U-turn maneuver to be able to get into the site. U-turns are very slow, they're inefficient, they affect the operations of the traffic signal, but also they have safety implications, again, because of the slow maneuvers that take place. Safety implications also as it relates to the fact that today, if you're on Ivory Street and you're traveling north, that right turn movement is not under signal control, it's under yield control. It's also set back from where the traffic signal is. So if you're making a U-turn, those right turn maneuvers are basically coming into your travel path at the same time you're making that U-turn. So again, that was the focus on coming up with an alternative access configuration for this project site. Next slide, please. So as a result of going through all of the analysis that we've done, we did have a series of recommendations. The first set deal with the site itself, so specific recommendations, all of which are included in the site plan in terms of looking at internal circulation, drive widths, one-way, no left turn, and do not enter signs within the project site. So the no left turn and the one-way would really be for exiting traffic coming out of the driveway to direct everyone to the right when they're coming out. Walkways, ADA compliant signs, making sure that we have no sight line obstructions within the site triangle areas, including snow, wind, roads. So these have all been incorporated into the site plan that you have before you. Next slide, please. So in terms of the off-site recommendations, I have specific slides to go into detail to each one of these, but the first deals with the Union Street, Ivory Street, Grossman Drive intersection. We will be reconstructing that intersection in its entirety. Not only the pavement, but replacing the entirety of the traffic signal system at that intersection, which is important. There's a lot of features of that signalized intersection that are not compliant with today's standards. Also, the way that the signal system is established today, it limits the town's ability to actually make or implement any changes at the intersection. So as we're replacing all of it, it's going to provide some flexibility, not only for the way that the signalized intersection operates, but I'll speak about in a moment the way that pedestrian circulation happens at the intersection as well. It will allow for changes to take place to the extent that the town would like to do those or try different things in the future that cannot be implemented today. And then lastly, I'll speak in a minute as well about the Route 3 southbound off-ramp. We did have conversations with the district councilor as well as with Mass DOT that were facilitated by some conversations that she had with Mass DOT. But we are making some specific improvements, as our attorney had mentioned, to the off-ramp to the highway in terms of lengthening the deceleration and storage area for the off-ramp from the highway. So we will be doing that as a part of this project at the request of Mass DOT. Next slide. We also have a transportation demand management program, which is really designed to encourage use of alternative modes of transportation. We have the MBTA the MBTA train station right across the street, where we are building a new sidewalk that you'll see and a crosswalk to be able to get across to the project site. So what we want to do is make sure, to the extent that we can, employees have the ability to be able to use these services that are available, both to reduce our traffic demands, but also the parking demands within the project site. So there's a series of measures that we will be undertaking to encourage the use of those alternative modes as well. Next slide. So now I'm going to speak about the access configuration for the project, and that has really been the focus of the majority of the time that we've spent in terms of reevaluating the project site. So this slide here shows the prior access configuration. So this was the original configuration that we were looking at probably back in March or April or so for the project site. And what this entailed was requiring that vehicles make a U-turn at the intersection in order to access the project site, because you cannot make a left turn directly into the project site. So in doing this, in order to accommodate the U-turn, there's a couple of things that had to happen. The first was on the Union Street westbound approach, so heading toward Washington Street, we would need to change the lane use configuration there. Again, the current left turn volume at that intersection is somewhere between 400 to 500 vehicles that want to make a left-hand turn heading down toward the MBTA station. As we add additional demand associated with the project, we cannot have a situation where we have a through left turn lane in the left turn lane. We need two dedicated left turn lanes to accommodate the increased left turn demand there. In order to accommodate the U-turn maneuver, we also need to place the right turn movement from Ivory Street under signal control, because we have to stop that traffic at the same time we would allow the U-turns to happen at the intersection. The dynamic of the change of the lane use on Union Street, as well as signalizing the double right turn coming off of Ivory Street, caused the delays to increase at that intersection, and I think more importantly, the queuing on the Union Street approach. And the queuing increased to the point where it was extending back into the traffic circle. So it created a series of untenable cause and effect at the intersection, which really caused not only operational issues at this intersection, but also spilled back potentially into the traffic circle. So as a result of that, we looked at alternatives to allow for a safer access configuration to take place, as well as more efficient traffic flow at the Union Street, Ivory Street intersection. Next slide, please. So that's the plan that we've shown here, and we'll zoom in a minute on this in a little bit more detail. But what happens in this plan here is essentially U-turns are prohibited at the intersection. So what we're doing is having U-turns turn on, so U-turns can't happen. So if you want a reverse direction, you make a left-hand turn from Union Street onto Ivory Street, travel down Ivory Street for a couple hundred feet, and then we, into the median area, we've constructed a left turn or a U-turn pocket there. So that U-turn pocket allows for vehicles to reverse direction, then travel back up Ivory Street, make a right-hand turn through the existing right-hand turn lane, and then proceed into the project site. This is a much more efficient traffic flow. It actually improves operating conditions at the Ivory Street intersection with Union Street, again, to the point where not only can we add the additional traffic from the project, but with the additional traffic, the retiming of the traffic signal, and the removal of the U-turns at the intersection, we actually have a betterment in terms of traffic operations at the intersection. So again, it's something where this reconfiguration with the improvements actually is a betterment and gets us back to a condition where we're essentially starting with existing conditions at the intersection, even 7 years in the future with this project constructed. So it's an improvement, and it also provides additional capacity for future development. Next slide, please. So now we look at the plan in a little bit more detail so that you can see all of the various elements that go along with it. So some of the new features that will be added besides the U-turn lane that's there is the crossing of Ivory Street. So there's a new crosswalk that will be implemented, and then all of the crossings at the intersection will be under signal control. So today, the Grossman Drive crossing does not have push buttons and does not have signal heads. So there's no control of that approach there. So essentially, pedestrians are left on their own to cross when they feel that it's safe to be able to do so. When we reconstruct the intersection, all of the crossings will be a part of the signalized intersection. We'll have push buttons and we'll have signal indications at the intersection itself. So that in and of itself is a safety improvement. It also improves mobility at the intersection. We will be reconstructing the wheelchair ramps and any sidewalks that are non-ADA compliant at the intersection. The U-turn configuration that we have to the south of the project site, and I know there was some discussion earlier this evening on the trees. There are street trees in the median that's there. In order to construct the median, there's probably the need to remove 3 trees, and then you heard we're going to be replacing 3 trees or installing 3 trees on Union Street. We will be relocating, hopefully, a couple of the trees that are in the area where we're widening. We may be able to keep those in the existing median and just shift them over to where it's being reconstructed. So what our goal is here really is in terms of the net new plantings, so the new plantings on Union Street as well as what we're going to be modifying on Ivory Street, that there's no change in terms of the number of street trees that exist in this area here. So that's what we're hoping to achieve with the design. Next slide, please. So this slide again here just focuses in more on the intersection improvements so you can see things in a little bit more detail. Just a couple of things to point out here. One of the additions in terms of notifying people of the no U-turn provision, there's a sign in the median nose at R3-4 that you see, but also we're installing an overhead sign. So there's a sign as you look to the, it'll be the northeast on the slide here. You also see a sign on a mast arm that's mounted over the road. So as you're coming off the highway or just entering this area from the traffic circle, you will see a sign that's overhead that says that there's no U-turns permitted at the intersection. We're also planning to have some wayfinding signs so that people are informed on how to get to the project site so that you'll know to be able to make the left turn at the intersection and then use the U-turn pocket to the south. Next slide. So this slide is more detailed in terms of the U-turn pocket. So there's a couple of things I wanted to mention with respect to the U-turn pocket. So as I said, it's a couple hundred feet after you turn from the intersection. So essentially what we're doing is replicating the storage length of the left turn lanes on Ivory Street. So if you're at the back of that queue in the left turn lane, you will travel a similar distance along Ivory Street and then have the ability to move over to get to the turn lane. And that's a typical design that you want to replicate any maneuvers where you might have to change a lane at least the same distance as the storage distance that you're turning from. So that if you're at the back of that queue, you have the same distance to be able to maneuver and weave over as the vehicle that's in the front of the queue. So that's how that distance was established. The length of the pocket is 1.5 times what we anticipate the average queue in that lane, the average queue in that lane is going to be. So we're predicting an average queue of about 3 vehicles, which is 75 feet. That pocket is closer to 120 to 125 feet in terms of the storage that's in there. So we have a design feature that's 1.5 times the average queue, which is typical for a design scenario, so that again, we're able to accommodate all of the vehicles that we're predicting they're going to make a U-turn, and then there's a factor of safety built into the design that's there as well. In terms of the pocket, where it's located, it's also between those 2 signalized intersections. So we have a signal at the MBTA driveway, and then of course we have the signal up at the Union Street intersection. So the traffic as it flows from, let's say, from south to north, the signal at the MBTA driveway does create some gaps to allow this U-turn maneuver to take place. That's been included in the modeling that we've done of the intersection. So as we're looking at the queuing, it does reflect the fact of we have the left turn phase that will go on at Ivory Street, which is feeding traffic southbound. We also have northbound traffic that's coming from the signalized intersection, and some gaps will be created as a result of the operation of the signal to allow for those U-turns to take place. Next slide, please. So some of the questions that we were asked with respect to the access to the project site is the ability, if you're coming out of the site and you want to make a right-hand turn, what does that look like and feel like for a motorist in terms of trying to get into the proper lane so that as I get up to the traffic circle, as you know, the curbside lane is really meant to travel south on Route 3. The lane near the inside is for either recirculation within the rotary, or if I want to go north on Route 3, I would use that lane, or to continue on along Union Street toward Weymouth. So if I want to come out of the site and make any of those maneuvers, how does it relate to the queuing that happens? So what I've shown on the slide here is the queuing that's predicted to occur 7 years in the future. And what I've shown in the red, that's the length of the queue that occurs there during the morning on a Saturday. So the distance is about 125 feet. So you can see measured from where the area is of the merge to get onto the rotary or to the traffic circle, you can see it gets nowhere near where the project site is located. During the evening peak hour, we do have queues that will extend back to and a little bit beyond the driveway. What's shown on here is the maximum queue. So the maximum queue is defined as the queue that may occur during about 3 minutes during the peak hour. So 3 minutes within a 60-minute period, the queue might get back to where the blue area is. 57 minutes, it would be less than what's shown on here. So what this analysis is showing us is basically during the morning and Saturday time period, and again, Saturday is when we have our highest traffic generation, the queue does not get anywhere near where the driveway is, so people have the ability to come out and get into either one of those lanes without being impeded by any queuing that would happen from the traffic circle. During the evening peak period, what we're saying is that there, on occasion, during about 3 minutes during that 57 or the 60-minute period, there could be times where the queue gets back to the point where it gets beyond where the driveway is. So you'd wait within the site until the queue clears and there's a gap and you'll be able to come out. But we're able to store that queuing, residual queuing, within our site without having it back up onto Union Street. So this operational analysis suggests that the driveway is able to operate in an efficient manner. There may be times during the evening peak period where you may need to wait to be able to get into that queue. But as you're all familiar with queuing as it relates to the traffic circle, it's not like a signalized intersection. It's actually a dynamic queue that happens. So it stops and then it moves along, but it's not something that it's static and you're not able to get out of the driveway. So that's actually helpful as it relates to a driveway at this location. Next slide. So lastly, the queuing on the off-ramps from Route 3. One of the things that we had undertaken in the past few months is actually some drone video observations of the queuing on all of the ramps as well as within the traffic circle. The reason that we undertook that analysis was to calibrate the traffic model as it relates to circulation within the traffic circle. So the calibration of the model, the way that we do that is we perform several observations of queuing on the ramps, and then we perform our analysis model, and we calibrate it so that the results of the queuing that we get under existing conditions matches what we observed. So then when we start with that, we have a good modeling for the basis of predicting what future conditions may look like. So as we looked at the modeling of the ramp, today the southbound off-ramp, which is where the majority of the queuing takes place, and that queuing is really most pronounced during the evening time period. So when we have slow-moving traffic along Route 3, people are trying to get off the highway, and we have some circulating traffic within the traffic circle that causes traffic to have to stop on the ramp and then wait for a gap to be able to get off. So today that queue, as we've observed it, is about 24 vehicles. So 24 vehicles probably get you down to about a third of the way along the ramp. And again, it's a dynamic queue, so it's not static. The queue actually rolls into the traffic circle itself. The storage that's available on the ramp, as we've shown here, it's about 61 vehicles. So today you have a queue of about 24 vehicles during the evening peak hour. You can store 61 vehicles on that ramp before it gets to the point where that 62nd vehicle is actually stuck out onto the highway and would impede the flow of traffic on Route 3. So as a part of the analysis that we've done, what we've said is today it's about 24 vehicles during the evening peak period. As we look at the year 2030, so 7 years in the future, we're predicting that queue may grow to about 52 vehicles. So longer on the ramp, but not to the point where it backs up onto the highway. With the project's traffic, we're predicting that queue could grow from 52 potentially to 71 vehicles during the evening time period. So what MassDOT has asked us to do is to restripe and extend the deceleration and storage lane coming onto the ramp an additional 225 feet, so that we're able to store the 71 vehicles that are predicted in the year 2030 in that area. So we've committed to doing that at the request of Mass DOT, subject to their review and issuance of permits. But that's what they've asked us to do as a part of the project. So that's something that we've agreed to do as a part of this project, because we think it's a betterment. It will improve traffic flow to some extent on Route 3, at least as it relates to getting traffic that's getting off the highway into its own lane, so it's not impeding the traffic flow on Route 3, even though it's moving slowly during that time period anyways. I think that's the last slide I have, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have now or later on this evening.
Thank you for that comprehensive overview. So I'll turn, I know there's going to be a lot of traffic questions, so. Director Santucci-Rossi, do you want to mention anything? Or, oh, I'm sorry, this was Assistant Director
I would
Murphy.
just kindly ask, we do have our 2 peer reviewers in attendance tonight, Greg Lucas of Time Bond, as well as Eric Diaz of Strong Point Engineering Solutions. I'd ask if they could come up and provide an overview of the reports they've done thus far, as there's been an extensive review of the traffic in addition to the stormwater management system.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think this is a good time for the traffic peer review, and then we'll move on to the member questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just for reference, my name is Greg Lucas. I'm a professional engineer, professional traffic operations engineer with Time Bond, and we did the traffic peer review for the board on this project. And it's clear from the presentations that were given from Attorney Marinelli and from Jeff Dirk that this has been a comprehensive process. We've had a number of meetings with the applicant team, with the planning team, to go over interim submittals that had the initial access, which was characterized as it didn't work very well, allowing left turns at the intersection on Union Street westbound. And we've had the opportunity to go through reviewing the alternative access, reviewing the comprehensive study that followed, provide comments on that, have had, responses to those comments, which have been largely addressed. And I think that the package, which was summarized in the presentation here and is presented through the most recent traffic impact and access study and the comments and responses, accurately represents the impact of traffic of this site. I'll point out 3 things that I think are important for the board to understand. One is the understanding that initial access with allowing U-turns doesn't work. It created significant issues, operational issues at the intersection, primarily, as was mentioned by Jeff, the conflict of those U-turning vehicles and the right-turning vehicles from Ivory Street looking to occupy the same space at the same time. It was not feasible. And so that drives us to the alternate access that was shown here with the new U-turn maneuver on Ivory Street, where vehicles will turn left onto Ivory Street, make a U-turn, come back, turn right onto Union Street, eastbound to enter the Chick-fil-A site. Another point is the intersection of Union and Ivory and the comprehensive signal reconstruction that's being proposed introduces pedestrian improvements that are something that, independent of this site, have been investigated by the town and desired by the town, specifically introducing that crosswalk across Ivory Street that doesn't exist today. So the ability to have that crosswalk and have it incorporated into the signal presents an improvement in safety for pedestrians, and certainly serves a desire for pedestrians who will want to cross from the corner where the T-station is to the Chick-fil-A site. The other improvement is on the opposite side on Grossman Drive, having that crosswalk, which exists today but is not signalized, to have that under signal control is an improvement for pedestrians at this intersection as a result of the off-site improvements. And then the third point is the Route 3 southbound off-ramp. That was something where we determined that yes, it's a dynamic queue because of the yield condition at the bottom of the ramp. People are yielding, they're moving. It's not stopping and stacking. It's kind of constantly moving, but at times it does back up. It does impact the highway, and the addition of traffic, specifically those diverted link trips that were talked about, people that are going by on a highway and now want to get off to go to this site, in addition to just the development of, growth traffic over the 7-year horizon. That was going to be a detriment to operations on the highway, and so it's a positive improvement that MassDOT has stepped in and is looking for an improvement to extend the deceleration lane there to hopefully limit the impact of queuing traffic on the highway. And so, in conclusion, we've had an opportunity to have a pretty thorough back and forth and review, but I'm happy to answer any questions from our perspective through our review.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll start with member questions, comments on the subject of traffic. Member McCamey?
It would be nice to get a copy of the presentation. There were a lot of bullets we couldn't, really refer. So let me start off with the crosswalk. I understand it's not signalized. I see people today get off the MBTA and they go either left or right. They go up to the, the mall. Clearly, even if you signalize it there, people get off the T and they're going to go over to the new site. That's going to cause an impact because the signal is going to be what, 20 seconds, 30 seconds?
So that's a very good point. So there's two things as it relates to it, and this is something I, probably went on a little bit too long in terms of the traffic study, but the way that the signalized intersection or the crossings are going to work right now is they're operating concurrent with a non-conflicting vehicle phase. So the way it would work is the crossing of Ivory Street, which is the new crossing, is probably the best one to describe. So as vehicles, the way it works today is as vehicles are heading toward the traffic circle, pedestrians would cross Ivory Street at the same time vehicles are heading, let's say, toward the traffic circle, so that we're crossing them at a time when vehicles aren't turning across the path of the crosswalk. To give pedestrians, so we're not adding to the timing of the traffic signal for the phase that's there because they're moving at the same time as vehicles that are not crossing the crosswalk are moving. What we are doing is for the pedestrians, because we're doing concurrent pedestrian phasing, is we're providing what's known as a leading pedestrian interval. So before any vehicles start moving, the pedestrians get a walk symbol so that they can then step off the curb and start to walk so they'll be visible to the motorists before a green light comes up on that approach. So the concept of it is get pedestrians off the curbs, have them start the crossing before you bring up the signal light for the non-conflicting vehicle phase. So what that allows us to do is we don't have to shut the intersection down while pedestrians are crossing. That pedestrians are crossing at the same time as vehicles are moving that aren't or not crossing the crosswalk.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but my point is it's going to increase the queuing and the wait time on all the roads. And my question is, how much is it going to increase? Are we adding 10 cars, 20 cars, another, 5 minutes every time somebody hits the button? Because, if people are going to get off and they're going to want to go over there, that button's going to get hit every 10 minutes.
So
7 minutes, whatever.
So so when you push the button, it's telling the signal that someone's there and wants to cross.
Right.
That will, so that signal phase is going to come up at the same time as the vehicle phase is coming up. The only difference is there's a 3-second delay between when someone pushes the push button and they start walking and the vehicle's getting released. So every time the push button's pushed, the only additional delay that's created is 3 seconds.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that when somebody crosses, it's not going to create any more queuing, any more traffic, any more delays.
Correct. With the way that it's phased, that's correct. Because we're only introducing 3 seconds of delay.
That doesn't, honestly, sir, doesn't make sense to me. But I'll accept your expert opinion.
Right. No, I understand that. But again, I think what you have to, if you can conceptualize the fact that the pedestrians are crossing at the same time vehicles are moving.
I understand, but, you know, vehicles are coming in different directions, and to me, it's got to be increasing the queue and the wait time. And if it increases the queue, then it increases the queue further down somewhere else. I guess that was my point.
Yeah, well, so one of the things, the way we're phasing it, it's not something, we're phasing it in such a way that it's not going to introduce any, we'll call it significant increase in queuing at the intersection, because it's only 3 seconds. Every time the push button's pushed, it's 3 seconds of delay when cars aren't moving, and then the cars move again. So that's the delay that would be introduced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah,
But-
I don't see it.
Okay.
Doesn't make any common sense to me,
But-
but let's just leave it
Yeah,
at that.
but I did want to mention on that, and it's not necessarily in line with what your question was, but what I wanted to mention as well, because this was a comment from the district councilor, was the new signalized intersection, to the extent that there's a desire to have pedestrians move independent of the vehicle, so stop all traffic, and then let the pedestrians move on all of the approaches. The new signalized intersection will allow that to take place, because there is some discussion about introducing delay is not necessarily a bad thing if at some point it's safer for pedestrians. The new signalized intersection will allow the town to make that change, adjust the timing of the traffic signal to try to accommodate both of those situations. So I did just want to mention
I appreciate the safety aspect.
Yeah.
I know something we, put it on the list, we should have done.
Correct. Yes.
We didn't. My question really pertains to the traffic
Yes.
and the queuing. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm just going to move on from there. This new U-turn over in front of the MBTA.
Yes.
You said it was going to increase, by my calculation, that stacking is 5 cars. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty close.
Again, it just doesn't seem to me to be enough space for enough cars. I mean, you're going to have all these people taking this new left turn and then a U-turn.
Not everyone.
So,
Yeah,
okay, but it just seems to me, just having lived here all my life, that a queue line of 5 cars just is not enough. But again, you know better than I do, so.
No,
Maybe you can
appreciate that.
explain it to us.
Yeah, just quickly, as you saw that, again, we'll provide the presentation, but the very small figures where we showed the trip distribution, the traffic that needs to make that U-turn, it's 45%, roughly, based on our projections. 55% of the traffic doesn't need to make that U-turn. So if I'm coming from Washington Street, I go straight through the intersection, turn right. If I'm coming from Ivory Street, I go straight up, make a right-hand turn, and then a right back into the site. So the U-turn only accommodates a subset of the traffic that's coming.
But 45%
Yep.
during peak travel hours, that's a lot of cars.
Over the
You
course
know.
of 60 minutes, yeah, it's,
Yeah.
right.
Well, it might take you 60 minutes just to go over there and do that, but it just, the percentage, I understand. The volume, it translates into a higher volume during certain periods, and of course, that's what we're worried about.
Right.
Is, as you pointed out. So just thinking about the exit ramp off the highway. Looking at it today, it's kind of there's not a lot of room there before you turn off. So what, are you basically going to be stealing a lane just further down? Is that what happens? And the cars then have to, in the right lane, have to merge over?
No, what we're doing basically is you think about today where the dotted line starts, where you kind of slide over into the pocket.
Right.
We're taking that dotted line and we're moving it toward the overpass, essentially.
Right.
That's what we're doing. So we're sliding it. We're not taking anything away in terms of travel lanes on Route 3. We're just lengthening the area that you have to get over and then slide into that queue.
Okay. There's a lot going on here, so I'm going to reserve and let some of the other members speak. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member McCamey. Member Kent?
Yeah, I guess picking up where Member McCamey left off. So the U-turn lane on Ivory to double back to get back to Union to get into the facility. So, what if that's full and people are backing further down Ivory back towards Union? Or do they just keep going and then try to make the U-turn at the parking, at the light to get out of the parking garage? Because right now on Ivory northbound, you're either getting cars, coming from straight down Ivory. You get a red light there so the cars can get out of the garage from the T. So now we have a third element, which is cars trying to make the U-turn. So how does that get managed?
So we've sized the U-turn pocket for, 45% of our traffic going down, making that U-turn, and then accounting for the fact of the flow of traffic that's on Ivory Street that impacts it. So that would be going by so that you couldn't make the U-turn. And what our analysis is saying is that 7 years in the future, with the project built, increased traffic on Ivory Street, the queue in that lane, the maximum queue is 3 vehicles. So we've sized it for 5 vehicles, so more than what we're predicting to happen there. So we've created some reserve capacity in that lane. So we're not expecting that there's a situation where it's going to exceed that. If there's an exceedance, yes, that last vehicle would stick out into the through travel lane heading southbound on Ivory Street, but we're not expecting that's going to happen based on the modeling. And again, we're looking 7 years into the future, and we're 1.5 times what we're predicting the queue that's there. The dynamic of the additional movement, this movement is not occurring, it's almost occurring midway between the Union Street signal and the signal at the MBTA driveway. So there's not really an interaction that occurs between the U-turn maneuver and either one of those intersections. So if I'm coming out of the MBTA garage and I'm making a left-hand turn, I'm gonna need to drive a couple hundred feet, let's say, up Ivory Street before I encounter someone that's making a U-turn. I think the most important thing is making sure that you have clear sight lines, because as I'm sitting in that pocket, obviously my focus is looking at traffic that's heading northbound. So as long as I can see the vehicles that are turning, again, they're from a stop condition turning and then heading northbound. If I can see that vehicle, I can judge that there's enough gap and be able to make the U-turn. So the placement of where the U-turn is critical in terms of not only the queue distance that you talked about, but also making sure that we have spacing between where the U-turn takes place and the signal on either side, so that we don't have a direct interaction or conflict between the two. And that's why we've located it where it is.
So there wouldn't be another traffic light where the U-turn
Absolutely
is?
not. No, and there's not a need to based on the volume and the number of gaps. There's enough gaps to be able to make the U-turn caused by the signalized intersection such that you do not need a signal for that to happen.
I have to push this a little further. I mean, most of the people coming out of that garage would be coming out of there between 5 and 7 p.m.,
Yes.
which is when most of the people would be
Correct.
looking to go to this
Right.
Chick-fil-A.
Right.
So, that would be the people trying to make the U-turn would be
Right.
making it at the heaviest traffic going north on Ivory, I would think.
Right. Yeah, and the operation of that signal is such that it does create gaps, even with the heavy traffic flow that's going out. So you're correct. When that left turn, when the phase comes on to allow traffic to exit from the gap, people are going to need to store in the pocket to wait for a gap to be able to come out. But the modeling that we've done, again, looking with growth and build out in the area, suggests that there is enough gaps and that the queue in that lane is not going to exceed the storage that's there, and you will be able to make that U-turn when the signal shuts off of the garage, and then there's the gap to be able to get out.
And then there's also the parking across the street next to the
Correct.
the waste treatment facility.
Yes, yes.
And they're also coming out onto Ivory.
Right, at the same time.
Half of
Right.
them are going right, half of them are going left, I would imagine.
Right, and we have built those into the traffic model as we've analyzed it.
Okay. I think I'll wait because I'm pretty curious what happens when you get after you've placed your order and you're into the 66 spaces, but you're going to address that later?
I think, I think we'll have an operations person to be able to talk about that, how that
Okay.
all works.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Member Grove, traffic?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. On the curb cut, it would seem to be a safer situation to keep the island, have a buffer between the entrance and exit.
So we started with the design like that. There's a couple of things. The first is to get the fire truck in and not have them have to swing way out and come back in. The island, makes that difficult. But I think the other thing that goes along with the same thing is, as a pedestrian is walking across the driveway, is what would be needed to get trucks to come in and out, fire trucks or delivery trucks.
Yeah.
The driveway ends up being extremely wide in order for us to put an island in the driveway. So it creates more challenging situation as well for pedestrians that need to cross that driveway. So the idea of eliminating the island and shrinking the driveway up as a result of that, it allows us to be able to reduce that pedestrian crossing distance. As we looked at it, I think we would have more concern and be more desirous of an island if we didn't have a median across from the driveway. So we have that median, so it physically prevents the barrier, but it also gives us the opportunity to install the signs that we need directly opposite a motorist. So we're able to achieve what's really required for directing motorists in the right direction, have a reduced driveway width without putting an island in the driveway. So we did debate that, and we had a plan that showed it, and then, you know, in discussions with staff as well as with the peer review consultant, the island was removed and the driveway was reduced in width to reduce the pedestrian crossing distance.
Okay. In terms of the traffic in general, I like the fact that you're doing away with the U-turn. I'm wondering if you couldn't increase storage in spaces, like including the right-hand turns on a light, a dedicated signal. Have a signal at your exit that would only be active during the westbound Union Street. You know, so, and if you had it, the lights, you'd want to stop the eastbound Union. That's the one that really, but that'd give you some stacking on Ivory, stacking before your exit, which might alleviate some of the traffic getting onto Route 3 itself. Or not alleviate, but...
Right. Meter it into there. What's interesting about this area is it's all about queuing.
Yeah.
And so the ability to exit the driveway is not so much controlled by what's going on at the Ivory Union intersection. It's actually what happens at the traffic circle. The traffic circle more influenced the ability to be able to get out, because the operations of the signal are such that each of the legs of that intersection, because of the way the lane configuration is, they all go on their own signal phase.
Yeah.
So the only time that we really have a constant flow of traffic across the driveway is, as you mentioned, is that eastbound flow, or if the MBTA driveway is exiting and we have a heavy right turn movement to get back onto Union Street to head towards the traffic circle. But otherwise, when the signal operates, because each of the approaches goes on its own signal phase, there's inherent delays created just by the way that the signal operates.
Right, but the U-turn traffic is going to add to that right-hand turn.
To some extent, yes. Oh, yes, it is. It's going to add to the right-hand turn. The problem with the signalizing the right-hand turn movement is what we experienced under the access configuration that we abandoned. When the MBTA garage lets out, there's about 700, almost approaching 800 vehicles that want to make a right-hand turn. You have to have a double right turn lane to do that, to get the queuing to work. And then we have to place it under signal control, because you can't have a double right except under signal control. That creates issues as it relates to the signal phasing, because of the way we have to add a phase to the traffic signal to accommodate the double right-hand turn. So it's a delicate dance, but I understand what you're trying to achieve. We struggled with that over the past several months to come up with something that allowed for the operations to improve, but we looked at exactly what you're speaking about.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Conley?
Thank you. I had questions related to the traffic analysis and how you treated diverted trips that would be related to seasonal traffic from the Cape?
So when we're required to analyze average month conditions in terms of the traffic flows. So seasonal traffic flow as it relates to traffic going to the Cape, I guess I would look at it and say if it's a diverted traffic coming off of the highway, I guess it depends on whether it's a Friday and you're heading toward the Cape and then you're getting off the ramp and then proceeding into the site, or if you're coming home and then you get off the highway and circulate. I don't know that in terms of how it affects Union Street, it still would end up, I guess I would look at it and say it would still come from the right of the site. So no matter, it's diverted from the highway, it still ends up in the left turn lane to make the U-turn maneuver that we're talking about. So in terms of seasonality, I don't think our analysis would be affected so much by an increase in diverted traffic toward the highway, because I think what we're doing is all of our diverted trips essentially we said come from the highway, because otherwise it's a pass-by trip. So that's how we put all diverted traffic from the highway. You know, arguably, I think there'd be more diverted trips versus new trips, I think, during that time period. So there might be a dynamic shift, but again, it would still come from the highway. So I don't know that it would affect our analysis materially, because it would still need to make the U-turn.
Thank you. And then I had a question. More recently at the T, it's no turn on red to enter. And how does that impact your analysis?
It actually is, it's a betterment, because when the traffic signal phasing is actually working in terms of how it conflicts with Union Street, if you can't make the right turn on red, it's all processed by the traffic signal. It affects the way the signal at the garage works, because it technically can't process as much traffic. But from the standpoint of how it flows and affects the U-turn ramp, it doesn't apply any additional traffic going across the U-turn maneuver. So it would only affect operations of the garage, because you can't make a right turn on red.
Thank you. And then I had a question. Are there any options to extend the median, or is that prevented by the crossing traffic? So that a U-turn is less possible?
Oh, so up at the Union Street intersection?
Yes. It looks like there's room?
I don't know why you would not be able to, because today it's cut back so you could actually do that. And I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to do that. All we would have to do is check to make sure that the trucks coming from Grossman Drive have enough room to be able to cross that, but I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to.
Okay. And then I had one last question. The signal upgrades that you talked about, does that allow for public safety vehicles, police or fire, to control those lights?
Yes, we will put an Opticom system into that, the intersection. So yes, we would absolutely do that. Whatever police and fire want, it's built into the signal, so it's just something as long as we understand what type of system they would like there for the preemption, because I know the fire station's down the street, we can absolutely add that into the signal.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, are we limiting our questions at this time to traffic?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
and then we'll move on to Part B.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, too.
And thank you. I have a couple traffic-related questions also, and thank you both to you and our peer reviewer. I can tell a lot of hard work has been put into this. First, I guess I just want to confirm the intersection, the Union and Ivory intersection will essentially work the way that it does now, as in you're not taking away the left turn lane from Ivory?
That's correct. We're not changing the lane uses that are there today, correct.
Okay, all right, that's good to see. I was worried about the project cannibalizing the business uses up on Grossman Drive through those changes. So, all right, so now some other questions. I saw on your traffic turn figures, it shows a U-turn coming up Union at Ivory. Is that the designation for the U-turn up on Ivory, or are you still anticipating that some of the drivers will just go ahead and make the U-turn even though it's restricted?
No, so the confusing thing about the traffic study is that it presents both scenarios. So it's presenting an alternatives analysis. What we've done is all of the U-turns that were happening at the intersection, plus any U-turns created by the project, were all redirected down to the U-turn lane. So under the alternatives analysis, that's where we're showing all of those trips being redirected. When you look at the traffic volume figures, it's not reflecting that change that's taken place, that we're proposing to take place.
Okay. And following up on the diverted traffic parts, so is the way that's figured, there's a 10% figure. Do you figure that 10% are diverted and then you essentially subtract that from the traffic counts?
We actually, so a diverted trip, the way it works in this case, because we took it off of Route 3, is a through movement on Route 3 got taken off of Route 3 and put onto one of the off-ramps to come into the project site. So it's new to the traffic circle and new to Union Street and Ivory and the U-turn. We then put that trip back onto the highway. So it works the way pass-by trips do at the driveway, but from the standpoint of the study area network, it's all new. So it was diverted as a through movement on Route 3 to one of the off-ramps and then added to the traffic circle and to Ivory Street and then put back.
Okay, so it's still showing as some of the new traffic on Union?
Yes.
Okay. And then as far as some of Member McCamey's questions with the pedestrian crossing, I agree that that would be a really nice benefit to the intersection. But I guess with that 3-second delay, I'd be concerned since there's 2 right-hand turns that aren't totally restricted, that if somebody's crossing, that could almost create more of an issue. Instead of knowing you're taking your life into your own hands, you have this.
Right. No, we've, so, I think one of the questions that was asked about the recent changes at the MBTA driveway, one of the changes will be the no turn on red, and we've analyzed that as a part of the signal system. So what we've said is on those approaches, anytime that you have concurrent pedestrian phasing, you need to, and you have a leading pedestrian interval, you need to post no turn on red, because what everyone's going to see is all red signal indications for 3 seconds as the pedestrians step off the curb. You do not want right turns being made at that time. So the right turn movements have no turn on red. And we have modeled that as a part of our analysis, saying any improvement in capacity that was created by having people be able to make the right turn on red, we've eliminated that and said it's no turn on red, 3 seconds of basically all red to this intersection, and then run our analysis. So those would be no turn on red.
But after the 3 seconds is over, the cars can still take a right.
Correct.
Across the.
That's correct. They will have a green, basically instead of a green arrow, it's a solid green indication that tells them you need to yield to pedestrians.
Okay. So that seems like somewhat of a concern, and I think sort of following up on what Member McCamey's concern was, is whether we could see any numbers on what queuing would occur if that was changed to allow a pedestrian to cross without the risk between the 3 seconds and whatever else the pedestrian crossing period is.
Yes, we can provide that to you. It's easy enough just to add an exclusive pedestrian phase, and then you can judge. And that's one of the things we did have a discussion about that. Obviously, when you have exclusive pedestrian phase, it induces that doesn't exist if you use current pedestrian phasing. It's really something where, to the extent that it doesn't create conditions, create additional safety concerns as a result of, let's say, it backs up into the circle, which crosses back up into the highway, it may be that's desirable, because having drivers wait a little bit longer and have pedestrians cross safer, that payback in and of itself is a net benefit. So we can run that analysis so you can see what that is. The other thing that can be done is that, because these are now going to be in a push-button control, is you can actually have fiber optic signs that come on to let you know there's a pedestrian crossing. So not only do you give the 3-second pedestrian interval, but also a driver that's making a right-hand turn, right in front of them is a sign that says there's a pedestrian crossing, so that it gives them added warning, especially if I'm making the right-hand turn from Union Street eastbound to Ivory Street southbound, and the pedestrian's coming from our site. Because you may start making that, and that pedestrian's crossing, you may see them, but you're also maybe looking someplace else. Having that dynamic sign in front of you does provide that added kind of warning device, and it wouldn't be active unless a pedestrian pushed the push button. So you would know that there's something changed at the signal, so that you're paying attention to it a little bit more. So again, it's another enhancement that can be added.
Okay. Okay, that's good. All right, what else did I have? So the U-turn on Ivory heading back to the site, would there be any issues with queuing for cars waiting to turn right on Union Street? That section gets busy at certain times. And it looks like the U-turn is back far enough, but with the extra traffic, is there a possibility that some new Chick-fil-A customer is going like this, and then all the cars are backed up here, trying to get either left straight or right, heading from Ivory towards Union?
So they've made a partial U-turn and they're kind of sticking out there at the back of the queue. You know, I would say if they did that, then the cars are queued up anyway. So if they stick out, it's unlike a situation where they're blocking traffic, because what they'd be doing is they're actually stuck in the queue that everyone else is. And then when the queue moves, they would continue with that traffic. I don't think it's going to happen, but to the extent that it does, it's because of queuing and they're not impeding the flow of traffic, which is not typically what, you know, when we would start to be concerned if it was blocking some ability for movements to take place. In this case, it wouldn't block any movements.
Thank you. I think that's all the traffic questions that I had. It's a lot of traffic for that site, and I mean, I understand the parameters that the property owner is working with and the uses that are allowed of right and what the demand is and so forth, but it's a lot of traffic for that area. That's not a great area to begin with. So I understand, and I see there's been a lot of information and a lot of things worked on it, but I'm sort of struggling with how that's going to work in the long run and whether or not there are going to be some impacts that are hard to overcome. So still, but that's all the questions I have right now. The presentation was very helpful. That explained a lot of it that I couldn't get from that giant book. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will follow up in response to some of the questions we heard tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think now we'll move on to the site itself.
Good evening. My name is Clint Matson with Chick-fil-A. Thank you very much for the opportunity to serve the town of Braintree. So I just want to talk a little bit about our operations and then our traffic management of how we open our stores and take it out of our grand opening into regular business. So our operations, ours starts with our operator. Our operator model is different from other QSRs. We select an operator that's going to be local and to own and operate this facility locally. They're either from the area, they want to move back to the area, they've moved away. We have a lot of people that were in the military that want to move back to where they grew up or their family is. And their sole bread and butter is to own and operate the Chick-fil-A. They can't have any other investments and stuff like that. So their bread and butter and their sole purpose is to run the Chick-fil-A in the community. So they will hire about 125 to 150 team members to operate the store. There'll be anywhere from 15 to 20 to 25 people at the store at all times during peak hours. But those are the 125 to 150 team members that will work at the store. Our store will be open from 6:30 to 10, Monday through Saturday. We are closed on Sunday. We're going to make a mass investment in the area with construction. It's a few $1 million project with 50 to 100 construction associates that will be working on the project. When we open the store, we'll be able to serve our guests through our drive-through, mobile carryout, takeout, go into the store and then take it out from the store, and then dine in the restaurant also. So when it comes to traffic management to our grand opening, we do realize there's going to be a peak at the very beginning of our grand opening with the excitement in the area. So we travel around the country, do these grand openings. We have a team of grand opening supervisors that will come to the facility and work with our operator either 4 to 6 months or 6 weeks before the grand opening of our restaurant. And they will stay with probably about a month after the grand opening of the restaurant to make sure everything runs smooth. In addition to that, we have a grand opening trainers that travel the country that open up our restaurants. We'll have between 20 to 30, maybe a little bit more than that, trainers that'll come in and actually run the restaurant and train our new team members to operate the restaurant. So they do this all over the country. They want to make sure the operations run smoothly with the drive-through and in the restaurant at all times during grand opening. So what we'll do a couple months in advance of our grand opening, we will put together a plan. We will present it and work with the town staff, local police, state police, fire, EMS, to make sure that we're all in conjunction with how the grand opening is going to work out during the grand opening period. So that grand opening period can vary depending on the demand of the restaurant. It typically lasts the first weekend, a couple weeks after that, depending on the demand. It may last a little bit longer than that. And then it'll fall down to a regular operations that we design the restaurant to do. I think someone asked a question earlier about the operations in the drive-through. So when you enter the site, you will flow around the bank end of the drive-through. You will come up to our order points where we have a canopy that covers our drive-through lanes, that covers the guests and our team members. They will take your order. Once that order is taken, it'll be put into the kitchen. And then you will flow around to another canopy, which is our pickup window. And that's actually not a window now. We've introduced a door, so our team members actually get to go out and serve our guests personally to their car. So they'll take their meal to the car and deliver it. It helps with the efficiency and the experience that our guests have in our store. So at that time, it's a little bit about our operations on grand opening. Definitely here to answer any questions you have. But I'll turn it back over to Frank to close anything out that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on the site, we have our engineers here, Greg Michelitis, and also Greg DeBonner is here from Bowler. We had some plan revisions that needed to be made, and we also were going to see what kind of additional things might come out of the hearing. So I think it's probably appropriate at this time to hear from Eric Diaz, who was a peer reviewer that we worked with on engineering and on the stormwater management. And then if there's any questions for us in the interest of time, then we're happy to answer them, if that makes sense.
That sounds great. Thank you. Mr. Diaz? Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Eric Dias, registered professional engineer with Strong Point Engineering. I will be brief. Obviously, traffic is going to rule the day here, and the stormwater on this site is nowhere near as exciting as the traffic is. But yes, as counsel for the applicant alluded to before, this is a site that is very largely impervious now, and the existing drainage system on the site does not much more than collect and convey stormwater. Because of, obviously, you are all very familiar with the state and local stormwater requirements and the standards associated with those, the existing system does virtually nothing in the way of recharging water quality. The folks at Bowler have done a fine job designing a system that addresses the standards and the local requirements very thoroughly. Everything, and they spoke a little bit before about deep sump catch basins and water quality units and a subsurface infiltration system. We've gone through 2 formal peer reviews with them so far. Most of our comments were confirmatory in nature. For example, we were not on site to witness test pits, so we asked for a little bit of additional information, and they did provide that to our satisfaction. The last letter that we got from Bowler had some items in it that were commitments to address our concerns. As council said, they didn't want to throw out a new set of plans right before the meeting. They wanted to obtain comments from the board and address things in one fell swoop. So, we're not in a position, without having reviewed those changes at this time, to necessarily make a final recommendation one way or another. But I will say that what I've seen, I'm very happy with the response. And once they address the things that they said that they would, and I have no reason to doubt that they will be addressed satisfactorily, I think we'll be in good shape on the stormwater design here. That was just a brief overview. I can get into any level of detail that you care to hear at this point.
Great. Thank you. At this point, let's see if any members have any questions or comments on the site design or the operation. Member McCamey? Member Kent? Conley?
Stormwater questions? Or are these just general questions?
Anything with the site or the operation or?
I did have a couple of questions for the applicant. One was for the development team, what the projected construction timeline would be and when you're hopeful to open.
Thanks, Pete Doucette with Torrington Properties. So the timeline, we've abated the buildings, so, pending an approval, MIPA, DOT, we would start demo immediately. That's about 2 months, so likely the spring. Well, the demo we would like to start in the fall, pending an approval. Then we'd go through MIPA and DOT approvals. We have about, 22 weeks for the build. Concurrently will be Chick-fil-A and the bank, and we've got about 3 months of site work, 3 to 4 months of site work prior to the buildings, and then another 2 months of site work to finish it up. And, all the off-site mitigation will be going on at the same time. So total duration, we're looking at about 10 to 12 months, including the demo.
Thank you. And then I had a question as far as the landscape plan. Could your team discuss the screening of the landfill and the time that may require to become effective in that view?
Yeah, I'll let Greg speak to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Greg DeBono with Bowler Engineering. I'm enjoying this meeting very much with how little I have to speak. That's very rare. Usually we take a lot of the lead discussing projects, but in this case, Frank's done such a great job, and obviously Jeff did an amazing job describing all the traffic. So the landscape plan, as Frank alluded to, is pretty extensive when it comes to the additional shrubs and trees that we're proposing on site. As far as when it comes to screening the landfill, we actually aren't proposing anything but just the grass strip between the existing row of shade trees that's at the back of the site today. What you can kind of see on screen is the ghosted aerial that's right over the property line. All the trees that are in what appear to be the back of the site, right behind the current motel, is not on our property. That is on the landfill side. So those trees would all remain. We're not disturbing them. No grading improvements beyond our property limit. So that vegetation would remain. And then really what you see when you're looking at this greened up plan is an extensive amount of vegetation along the frontage. A lot of perennials, a lot of flowering shrubs, mixed in with some evergreens, just to give it that seasonal interest and kind of like that traditional street frontage of shade trees that really does not exist out there now.
And could you discuss the landscape that was shown on the median?
Sorry, on the median. So, it's not on this plan currently. This was kind of a recent discussion about looking to basically replace the shade trees that are going to be taken out of the median and ivory and be able to either repurpose those or replicate in kind. So if I go back to actually that 3D rendering, those are actually depicting roughly where the 3 trees would be going. So those obviously aren't there now. We'd be creating basically tree wells within the concrete island and proposing those trees in the middle.
Thank you. And then my last question is more for the development team. Did you want to? My question was about the responsibility for the current maintenance of the site and in terms of being a good neighbor, what your plans were while you await approval. Currently, the fencing, the cover on that's falling off, there's debris at the site, and what's your group's plan to address that?
We just recently addressed it, some concerns that came up from, I think it was from Councilor Meredith. But yeah, we will go there at any time we're asked to. We try to keep the overgrowth cut down. We've done that a couple times. The screening we put up just to try to hide it as an eyesore, but we can go back. We'll make any repairs at any time that we're asked to. And if there's issues right now, we can go there and address them. We were just there, I think it was a week or 2 ago.
And did you see issues at that time?
We did, yeah. We cleaned up the fence. We boarded up some open openings where there was obviously people have gotten in there. And that was about all that was requested. I think it came from the building department and from Councilor Meredith.
Okay, and then a question about the currently, like the paved surface seems to be broken. Is that part of your testing and due diligence, or?
Yes, that was part of the test pits, and we've done a lot of borings there, geotechnical and environmental.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you. I don't really have any site-related questions. Director?
I just wanted to add that we, the planting in the median might not be able to happen because of utilities, and it's fairly narrow in there. We're concerned about growth and interference, and we were going to have some discussions with the applicant about putting some planters along there that could be planted, you know, not to hinder any visibility, but, you know, you're in your car and you have flowers and flowering things and pretty things at different times of the year in different colors. So we really appreciate the effort for beautification in that section, but I don't want the board to get, the trees look great in the rendering, but that might not be able to happen. That's something engineering will be taking a look at. And then we had some initial discussions with the mayor about would planters be something that would be palatable in that location for the town.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. And Assistant Director Murphy, would you like to add anything else at this point before I open it up to public comment and questions?
I'll refer till after the public comment, please.
All right, so this is a public hearing. If anybody has any comments or questions on the project, please come on up and introduce yourself and name and address for the record.
Thank you, Chair Croa and members of the board again. For the record, my name is Meredith Baraka at 59 Hobart Ave, and I am the District 5 Town Councilor in this capacity right now. I did send an accompanying memo to the board, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief summary tonight before you. And before I begin, I do want to thank Mr. Doucette, Mr. Dirk, Mr. Marinelli. Their team has been responsive to my questions. They've been open with communication. They've made themselves available. And I do appreciate the changes that they have implemented thus far that we've heard about this evening. As we've already discussed, the Motel 6 property is in the heart of District 5 and a gateway to the town. So redevelopment presents a grand opportunity to reimagine how we can say welcome to Braintree. And this redevelopment has been and it continues to be a priority for our community. As important, though, I believe, is advocating for this to be the best possible project it can be for District 5 and for Braintree. I acknowledge that as uses allowed by right, fast food, and a drive-through and with a bank have already been deemed appropriate in this part of town. I believe asking for community benefits is justified and appropriate to mitigate the predictable impacts this project will have on our roadways and our environment. And I'd ask the board to consider the following conditions to accompany an approval. 1, the construction of a shared use, a walk-bike path along the stretch of Ivory Street that will be reconfigured as part of this project. This would comply with Braintree's Complete Streets policy, and it will help to offset the environmental impact of car-centric business. Number 2, compensation for increased public safety personnel, which will be required to deal with the predicted traffic impacts around the Rotary on Route 3 and as a result of the proposed concurrent pedestrian vehicle crossings. Number 3, a memorandum of understanding to be entered into between the town and the proponent to compel payment for a future traffic study pertaining to the Ivory Union Street intersection, especially as it relates to the proposed concurrent crossing that we've heard about earlier this evening. And 4, and I do appreciate the applicant's willingness to plant additional trees, but I would ask for even above and beyond that to mitigate the environmental impact of increasing vehicle traffic in a state-designated environmental justice zone. Private developers know the benefit of Braintree. We have an ideal location, municipal utilities, and well-informed and engaged residents. And as we seek to enhance community vitality and promote a high quality of life, Braintree residents also deserve to equally benefit from new development. Reasonable benefits that can be directly tied to the project impacts serves the best interest of the new development and the residents, and should be an assumed starting place. I urge this board to ask more of this developer so we can make this project the absolute best it can be for District 5 and Braintree. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the service to the town.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Wenzel. I live at 74 Spring Street in Braintree. I'm a longtime resident of Braintree. I've been a resident for 61 years. The presentation that I saw this evening is a vast improvement from what was presented previously, and I think it will benefit the town greatly. However, I still have some concerns with regard to the traffic pattern. The first is the issue of pedestrian traffic coming out of the MBTA. Second is the number of trucks that go into the incinerator, or, pardon me, the transfer station, will add to the traffic. The third thing that I had was most of what we have been talking about with respect to the traffic is traffic flow going into the Chick-fil-A restaurant. My concern is the traffic coming out. That area at the Rotary is very, very congested. The town's done a really good job with outlining the traffic flow with respect to marking the street, where you can go up onto Route 3 or go into the traffic circle and then go up Union Street. When the traffic comes out of the Chick-fil-A, they're going to be faced with getting, if they want to go up to Union Street, they're going to be faced with getting from the right-hand lane into the left-hand lane to get into that traffic going around the circle. And then if you notice all the traffic coming from around the traffic circle that wants to go up onto Route 3, they come around there at extraordinarily high speed, anywhere from, I don't know, 40 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour. You're going to have traffic accidents there if they don't take that into consideration, and I don't know how you adjust for that. The other thing that I heard them talk about was the traffic lights. And without someone actually looking at what's going on with the traffic and having control over the traffic lights, I think you're going to end up with gridlock. That's my opinion. And I guess that's about all that I have that I think, again, this was a good study that they did, but I think it still needs some work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Good evening. My name's Bob Durgan, for the record. I live at 31 Totnes Road. I just like to, I'll be brief because, to be honest, I feel insulted. If you're going to tell me that you have a right to use this land, okay, I buy it. It's your right. You bought the land. But if you're going to sit up here and tell me after I've driven around that rotary thousands and thousands of times since the 70s, that this isn't going to increase traffic, that this isn't going to be dangerous, I'm insulted. I had to get off at Washington Street for entire Christmas seasons because it's backed up and people come shooting down at 60 miles an hour and try to get in. It's how many times, they just took the pole down where the last gentleman just talked about. They took the pole down right where that is. People now, where it's marked, they get in the right and they don't realize they now are stuck to go to the Cape, so they just cut over. It hasn't made it better. It's made it more dangerous. I don't see how any of this traffic's going to work. They came forth with a plan that they were going to take a U-turn at Ivory Street. Now all they did, at Union Street rather than Ivory, now all they did was move it down the street a couple, 50 yards. I don't know how they don't think this is going to back up. All you have to do is Google Chick-fil-A. They have the slowest queue rate of any business in the country at 8.5 minutes. It's insane with the highest amount of volume. I don't understand how they think that's going to work. Like I said, they've created traffic nightmares all over this country. Some of them are trying to shut them down because of it. It's just disappointing that we should, for once, take like a long-term approach. You know, what that area needs is TOD. It needs transit-oriented development. And, you know, they can come in and tell you that they're saving our town, but they're not. That traffic, I hope they plant lots of good trees and plants, because you're going to have plenty of time to smell them and enjoy them while you're in that queue, while you're in traffic. You know, they can smirk all they want, but all this is, the average, I'd love to see Chick-fil-A get up here and tell us, the average I read is about $8 million they're going to make. And what are we getting? Traffic and trees and a little bit of tax money. It's not a good trade-off for Braintree. We can do a lot better. I just hope and wish that this board will do everything it can to stop this. It's not what Braintree needs. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
We did have from the study, and actually when you take the study that was talked about from the Wall Street Journal, there is average total time by cars in line. Chick-fil-A is the lowest with 107 seconds. So, you know, it all depends how you're manipulating the data, but there were a lot of graphs in that report, some of which weren't presented, like the average time based upon the number of the queue, satisfaction by brand, friendliness by brand. All of that is Chick-fil-A #1. So I'll introduce these into the record.
Thank you. And then I would sort of ask, oh, we have another public comment if you'd like to come up.
My name is Janet Daler. I live at 466 Middle Street in Braintree. I've been here since 1963. I originally came to this meeting because I wanted to see what was going on with all of the traffic and how this was going to help. I'm not sure that I've found out it's going to help. I'm going to have to leave a lot of that to you. One of the things I hadn't discussed or thought about is the issue of people walking across the crosswalks. We've already gotten in South Braintree an issue of coming from McDonald's around the corner. There's a crosswalk there. Everybody goes right through it. I cross it a lot, and I've been almost hit 2 times. Somebody else was hit. I want to know that when the crosswalk gets lit and somebody's going across the street, all of the cars stop. Not that they wait for 3 seconds for you to get to start across the street, but that you stop. There was the same thing as we have in South Braintree Square where they come around the corner from McDonald's. That same day, there was an 18-wheeler that came around the corner in Andover and killed a 6-year-old boy because the crosswalk, he didn't stop for the crosswalk. And my issue is that we don't just put up a sign that says, watch out for crosswalk people. Don't do that. Stop all the lights that are going around the corner. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would ask if Mr. Dirk or someone else from the applicant team could respond to the additional questions and requested conditions from Councilor Barica with respect to the shared bike lane and I guess the future traffic study. And the third one would be somebody else from the applicant team about additional compensation for police or other public safety detail. Any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to address this. I mean, obviously, we as a team, first we've heard of those, so we need to discuss it in more detail. The idea of the shared use path, I think it's just really a matter of looking at where it's appropriate to put the path, whether it's on our side of the street or whether it's on the MBTA side. And I think that's something we would need to work with staff and probably the peer reviewer to consider where the appropriate place to put it. I mean, the destinations would seem to be on the MBTA side rather than on the project side. So it doesn't mean it doesn't link to the project side, but it would mean that you would build the shared use path on the side where the desire lines are, which would be the MBTA side. When you get up to the intersection, you would then, it would transition to use the crosswalk then to get across to our project side. So I think it's something we need to look at. It seems to be, it wants to be on the other side, but it doesn't mean it can't be incorporated into the design of the intersection. In fact, I think of the discussions that I had had with the councilor, we had said we would look at that. And certainly the signalized intersection, it's brand new. So there's no reason why it can't be designed to have all of the things that we talked about tonight. So that's something we need to look at. I think consistent with one of the first public hearings you had, I think there was a monitoring provision that went along with the daycare center and the former Dunkin' Donuts site. You know, it's not uncommon, especially when you've got a use like a Chick-fil-A, that's a condition of the approval, that there's some follow-on study. So you know, when I do peer reviews, and I would recommend it if I was doing the peer review for this, so I don't think that's uncommon that that's included as a decision. And what you want that to look at is up to the board. We've committed to providing that additional analysis as it relates to the operations of the traffic signal with and without an exclusive pedestrian phase. So we'll provide that. But if that's something that is a part of that follow-on study, obviously that can be included. But it's not uncommon that the board would include that.
Okay, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, we will work on the 4 conditions. The question is where to locate. We're already putting in sidewalk to the extent of our frontage, and as you come down Ivory Street, it at least goes. Sorry. That's okay. Sorry, Jan. That's all right, Jan. Baseball's our favorite sport. So. But we go with the sidewalk to the end of our property, and then if there's a place to put the bike lane on the inside, and we've had, so that might require the town to cooperate in terms of the landfill and the strip there, and is there room to grant an easement there? We would install it. The town might have to provide the strip to do that, but we're putting a sidewalk for the extent of our frontage. Secondly, the compensation for public safety, we would expect to pay, obviously, for police details, like Clint was talking about with the opening program that Chick-fil-A has. We would pay for police details and so forth as needed, and so that definitely is something that can be well, police details are needed at the opening, but I'm talking longer term would have to be looked at in terms of whatever kind of public compensation is called for. I don't know what it is beyond that. By the way, I can't think of a project where on site plan review somebody said they're redoing the entire intersection. That's a tremendous benefit. The Torrington is redoing the entire intersection, which includes the cabinet, the ability to program. We've talked with a counselor about that to try whether it's different timing with pedestrians and whatever. So that is a huge mitigation in terms of the project, the redo of the entire intersection. The third thing that was mentioned was an MOU on monitoring. And an MOU on, we do that anyway. And the staff, Ms. Santucci-Rossi and Mr. Murphy, always include in the conditions a certain period for review of traffic to make sure that the numbers are lining up with what was presented and if there's any material variation. And then fourthly, on the planters, that's no problem to substitute the planters in place of the trees. And as far as we're concerned, the more trees, the better. You know, we've come forward with a very generous, attractive, aesthetic redo of the site that the town can be proud of. And if there's tweaking that people want to make in terms of trees, then we'll certainly be reasonable about that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Assistant Director Murphy, do you have anything else to add at this time?
Yes, just for the board and the public as well. We issued a second staff report on September 6th, and that highlights numerous amount of items that still need to be completed by the applicant. We still are awaiting review of the special permit for floodplain, which is in part being performed by our stormwater peer review as well as staff in regards to the criteria of the special permit. There are several aspects under site plan review that still need to be met. Some of it's slowly trickling in. I've received some things by the applicant team. We're hoping to get to review those once we have a full resubmission ahead of the October meeting. Staff has recommended that we continue this to the October meeting at the mutual agreement between the board and the applicant.
Thank you.
So we would aim to get the revised plans in time for review prior to the October meeting, and then hopefully be in a position to ask that the board allow conditions to be at least drafted. And we, as Eric Diaz said, he's looking for information on test pits and so forth, and commitments on what Bowler has to provide in the revised plans, and we'll get that filed. And we did send the deck that was requested during tonight's hearing. Pete did forward that to the staff during this hearing. So the data that Jeff presented, the exhibits that Jeff Dirk referred to, are now forwarded to staff.
Thank you. See if any other members have comments at this time. Member McCamey?
No, nothing.
Member Kent?
Questions, thinking in terms of perhaps mitigation. Does the franchise do deliveries, for example, where they'd use a poor analogy, but like pizza, that somebody would, 5 people from South Braintree would call in an order, and rather than have 5 cars come to pick it up, one van would go out and make a delivery, and that would mitigate traffic somewhat? Is that a part of the model?
Yes, we do delivery. A lot of our stores start out with no delivery. They start incorporating third-party deliver with Uber and DoorDash and stuff like that. And then once they get established and stuff and they want to open that channel, our operators can decide to have a delivery vehicle that's specifically to Chick-fil-A that delivers food to our guests.
Yeah, I mean, it would be most effective if it was multiple deliveries with one vehicle.
That's correct.
As if, yeah, okay. And just help me understand the model, the business model, but, so there's 60-some cars in the queue?
There's a room for 60 cars in the queue,
Okay,
correct.
Okay, and that would be, so people coming in that hadn't called in an order ahead of time or texted in an order ahead of time, those people would just come park and go in and get their meal and come out?
So yeah, it's a variety of different ways. We do have a mobile app, and you can order online, that you can go to a curbside, and our team members will bring food out to your car in the parking lot, or they can go into the store and pick up their food, or they actually can go through the drive-through once they pre-order. So it skips the step of ordering in the drive-through, and it just expedites their order through once they get on the vicinity of the site, they'll start prepping their order, and it'll expedite the ordering of their food.
Okay, so the people in the queue are waiting for orders that most of them had placed at that, one of the boxes there in the diagram, sorry.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so yeah, I understand it a little better now.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Member Grove? Member Conley?
I just wanted to go back to the current condition of the site and formalize the request to make improvement there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I guess I just follow up just to confirm some of the questions with the traffic, that I would like to see updated numbers with the crosswalk being timed to allow a pedestrian to go across without any traffic movements. I do think there's going to be a good number of teenagers crossing there, and even adults are more distracted and looking at things, and I think
You provide some of that to the board. That was looked at early on, trying to do an exclusive phase, and it was a disaster, from what I remember.
Right, there was a significant increase in queuing, but I think we'll summarize that, though, and explicitly, because we did look at it with the peer reviewer, but we'll summarize that so that you have it as a part of the record to compare. You have everything else that was something that's not probably a part of the record, but we'll provide it.
Thank you. Yeah, I would really like to see that with the intersection level of service and queues
Yes.
tables. with
We'll
that
provide just
information.
an analysis as we presented with a leading pedestrian interval, and then with the exclusive pedestrian phase, so you can look at them side by side.
Okay, thank you. And then just for the figures that I was looking at earlier that are based on the U-turn. I can't
Yes.
remember if it's figure 14, I think.
I can provide updated figures that reflect what we've set as our preferred access configuration, so that it'll match up to what the analysis shows.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think we all know traffic is a big issue here, and I think the more information that we have to be able to take a look at, the better we can make an informed
I agree,
decision.
and it may help with some additional questions as well.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I would just say, in response to some of the public comments, that I agree that there's a lot of uses that would be better for this particular site. I love Chick-fil-A, nothing against Chick-fil-A with that comment. But it's a one-way in and out. It's a busy road. You can't take a left. You've got the rotary right there. It's a tough site for 5,000 cars, even if 2,400 are going by it. And I think that it's a state of when we delay looking at zoning in the town, and then we have uses of right, and in this particular case, the applicant went in for a dimensional variance and obtained it early on, and that was a discretionary review. And when we look at these projects, it's to have an extensive review and conversation with the applicant, which I know was had, but in order to look at what else could be out there. But as Attorney Marinelli correctly said, it is, at this point, it's a site plan application in front of us, and what we can look at as a board is what is safe and what is the site plan requirements, and that's what the applicant is allowed to do as long as they can show that it's safe. So they've done a lot of work, and I'm looking forward to seeing the updated numbers, and we'll see where we go from there. But if anybody, I guess I'll just confirm, so the applicant is okay with continuing to October?
Yes.
Okay.
If
that's
there
fine.
was a request to see the revised plans before considering, conditions or just drafting, we're fine with that.
Okay.
We'll get the revised plans in. I think as Clint presented, there is a novelty period, but the demand doesn't, it does attenuate. And you can see that in Hanover, in Dedham. My son is 12 and a half. We've been to both of them, and we have no problem going through the drive-through or going in and sitting down. So.
All right, thank you. So that, so take a motion on the application. Oh, sorry, either of you have anything to add?
No.
Okay.
We were just talking about.
Okay, all right. All right, so the applicant is okay with the continuance. I guess we'd be looking for a motion at this point on whether or not to continue.
Move to continue to the October meeting.
Okay. All right, so
Second.
Member Kent made a motion to continue to October 10th, and a second by Member Grove. All those in favor? Aye. All right.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time and attention.
Okay, and then that is all of our agenda, so I'd just be looking for a motion to close the hearing tonight. To adjourn, all right. Motion by Member Grove to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Kent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.